one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, May 11th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 6 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Another batch of essential workers are eligible now to book their COVID-19 vaccine appointment, along with more people who have underlying health conditions. City News reporter Jason White with that story.
The people who make your takeout order and stock the shelves at your grocery store are among those getting their turn to be vaccinated this morning, as the eligibility list expands to include more essential workers. At-risk health conditions like heart disease, liver disease, and diabetes are also on the list. So far, the age group remains those 50 and older, except for all adults 18 and up who live in hotspots. Ottawa Board of Health Chair Councillor Keith Eglai says those hotspot areas are being targeted with local pop-up clinics.
We don't necessarily put out a press release because, again, it's a short-term interim clinic. It's a pop-up, and it's targeted to getting a particular community.
Pop-up clinics do not require appointments, but more people outside of hotspots will become eligible later this week when bookings open to those 40 and older starting on Thursday. Jason White, City News.
City News time, 9:01. The top doctor in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit urging the province, when they do extend this lockdown, do it for 2 full weeks. Dr. Paul Romiliotis says case counts are starting to trend down, and if we extend the lockdown, more progress in the fight against COVID-19 can be done.
This will be likely our last lockdown, and that's what we're aiming to do. So two weeks more will allow both for us to increase the vaccination rates, because more vaccine is coming in the latter couple of weeks of May, and at the same time will allow for those cases to start continuing to go on the downward trend.
Now, Dr. Romiliotis says he is very concerned about potential spread of COVID at May long weekend gatherings. That's why he is pushing for this extension. He stresses if we can keep those from happening and increase the vaccination rate with more doses arriving this month, we can lower the admissions to hospital and other stresses on our healthcare system. City News time, 9:02. The country's airports getting hundreds of millions of dollars in financial help from the federal government.
The Trudeau government is launching a basket of programs to bolster airports with hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. It was first announced back in November. An unnamed government official who spoke on a condition of anonymity because the announcement is not yet public says Ottawa has laid out the criteria for airports to access upwards of $740 million in capital investments over the next 6 years. Nearly $500 million of that is bound for large airports to put toward critical infrastructure such as runway repairs and transit stations. Analysts say that while the biggest airports and those of the smaller community-sized airports will be the first to recover from the pandemic shutdown restrictions, the mid-sized airports may struggle unless the airlines are mandated to offer service. At the Business Center, I'm Mike Uppel.
City News time, 9:03, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
One more cool and unsettled day, and then a weather pattern change for us. We start to turn things around. Some showers today, gusty wind, and the high only 9 degrees. 5 for the low will clear overnight, and tomorrow mainly sunny, milder up to 17. For today, the high only 9.
And right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 6 degrees. It is unlikely it will match the record-setting season last year, but the hurricane outlook for this year, it's going to be active.
Never before has a big storm developed in the Pacific Ocean this early in the year. And while Tropical Storm Andres does not appear to be a threat to the U.S. mainland, it may offer a hint at what the coming 7 months will look like. Forecasters anticipate a busy hurricane season with 20 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes, far short of last year's 30 named storms and 7 major hurricanes. Jim Ryan, ABC News.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Among the headlines I took note of this morning: gas stations run dry. Gas stations run dry as pipeline hacking will take days to fix. I'm sure it's nothing. Line 5 is supposed to close tomorrow, by the way. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. David's back. I'm back. And we now return you to your regularly scheduled crisis. There is much to discuss this morning. We will talk about many things like lockdowns, vaccine rollout, children back in class, going after the bad actors of long-term care homes. I mean, is this something that now demands a criminal investigation? It's looking more and more like that, isn't it? There were people living in Ontario long-term care homes. They didn't die of COVID-19. They died, but they didn't die of COVID-19. They died of neglect. They starved to death. They died of dehydration. Shouldn't that be a police matter? What would be involved in something like that? A criminal investigation. And at the end of a criminal investigation, who do you put in handcuffs? The staff? Working in the homes or the executives of the company? Going to get into that today. And the backlog, we're heavy on healthcare stuff today. The backlog of medical procedures, the collateral damage. Dr. Robert Cushman told me this morning, that's how he described it. I interviewed Dr. Robert Cushman this morning, the chief medical officer for Renfrew County, called it the collateral damage, the backlog in the healthcare system. New report out from Ontario's Financial Accountability Officer on our program this morning, also known as the FAO. The latest report from that office is not an encouraging read for our healthcare system in the province of Ontario. My goodness, people, we're in a deep, deep hole. The FAO says Ontario is looking at a spending shortfall in our healthcare system of almost $62 billion over the next 9 years. A shortfall that starts out at a mere $3.7 billion. Hey, remember when that was a lot of money? $3.7 billion in 2023, and then it's going to hit $12.5 billion by the year 2030, and that's why you have premiers like Doug Ford in Ontario, but he's not the only one. They all want more money for healthcare. They're begging Mr. Trudeau for more money for health care, but they can't make any headway with this prime minister who's more interested in going 50-50 on child care. And if you're a premier, like, bang, bang, bang my head against the wall. I don't need money for child care. I need money for health care. But I can't win the election on health care. I can win an election on child care. There's an election coming, you know? This FAO report says because of the pandemic, it's going to take 3.5 years to clear the surgery backlog and more than 3 years to clear the diagnostic procedure backlog. And that's only if the Ford government throws $1.3 billion at the problem, and the Ford government hasn't budgeted that money. It's only budgeted $610 million, which is, well, less than half of what would be required to clear the backlog in 3.5 years. You know what's going to happen? Sadly, someone waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting some more is going to die on a wait list. It's happened before. We know this. I would remind you what the Supreme Court of Canada said in its Shauli decision about wait lists and health care. Access to a wait list is not access to health care. A wait list is not health care, said the Supreme Court of Canada. I know it's not the happiest of topics, but you know what? Sometimes the news ain't pretty. We have to get a handle on the situation with health care in this province, in this country. It's not the best in the world. The Canadian healthcare system wasn't on a sustainable path before the pandemic. And you know what? There's an old line, when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. Well, our healthcare system, it's been treading water for a long time. Reality. Reality is Newfoundland. It's a bitter dose of reality that's been offered to Newfoundlanders. Newfoundland is going broke. There's a new government report, and we're going to talk about it. It's called the Green Report, authored by Moya Green. Used to run Canada Post, chair of the Premier of Newfoundland's Economic Recovery Council. And this report lays it out in no uncertain terms. And it's the Buckley's mixture of government reports. Fail to do all of this, the province of Newfoundland is insolvent. Schools will close, teachers will not be paid, nurses will not be paid in hospitals that will have to close. Like, get a load of this. Busted, okay? No money. You're out of money. You can't even meet the payroll. In fact, the report says the only reason Newfoundland hasn't gone broke already is because of pandemic aid from the federal government. Otherwise, Newfoundland would be insolvent already. So, university funding, you have to cut that. Healthcare funding, you need to cut that. Wage freeze. Pension reform. Can't afford to pay public servants the pensions they were promised. Done. Done. Indexing pensions? Over. All taxes need to go up. All of them. And anything that isn't nailed down that the provincial government owns, that it can put a for sale sign, there should be a for sale sign on it. The Liquor Control Board, the Lottery Corporation, the Hydro Utility, Crown Land, mineral rights, drilling rights, fire sale. Newfoundland is for sale. The question is the Newfoundland experience a uniquely Newfoundland problem? Or is it a, here's some Trudeau speak for you, is it a whole of government problem? This is a whole of government problem. We're going to put that to our guest today, Professor Ian Lee from Carleton University, and Don Drummond. He's been through this before. Former top official in the Department of Finance. What Department of Finance is that? Oh, the deep-cutting Paul Martin Department of Finance of the mid-1990s. Former chief economist at the TD Bank. He's with Queen's now, Queen's University. This Newfoundland report is huge. Folks, Newfoundland is stuffed with liberals, okay? It has a liberal government provincially, and they only send liberals to Ottawa. Liberals, cut, or go broke. That's called the rock and the hard place. Lockdowns, we can get into Ontario lockdowns again. The news reports indicate we're not coming at a lockdown, stay-at-home order, state of emergency for weeks yet. What we're living like right now is going to basically be our lives for at least the next 3 weeks. It was supposed to end next week on the 20th. We're just not there yet. By all accounts, that's the government's thinking right now. I'm open to getting your reaction to that. We do the Talkback Hour every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. Hour of phone calls, hour of opinions. It can be an hour of debate. It can be an hour of arguing. It can be an hour of laughter and fellowship and camaraderie. It can go in any number of directions. Sometimes it depends on the mood of the host. June 2nd, June 3rd, our next shot at tasting freedom. You always wondered what it was like to wait for a parole hearing. This is what it's like, folks. Everything that we're living through right now is going to be in effect for basically the next 3 weeks. What do you think of that? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. And I want to talk about the cost of living, okay? I have been listening, reading, watching the financial news lately. Financial markets are now seized upon the issue of the day for financial markets is inflation. It's the cost of living. Officially, in Canada, StatsCan says the annual inflation rate is 2.2%. What do you think of that number? If I said to you the cost of living has gone up 2.2% in the last year, sound about right to you? Sound about right to you? Sound about right? I don't know. I know it was almost $7 for a pound of butter at the grocery store on the weekend. Gas is $1.30. We've all read the news, seen the news about the price of lumber. We have copper at all-time highs, iron ore all-time highs, corn, soybeans, wheat, pork prices, all big increases. And you have to be a millionaire to buy a house. So if I said to you the cost of living has gone up 2% in the last year, what would you say? Would you laugh in my face? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, we all loved our rock T-shirts growing up, right? It was our badge. Hey, we went to this concert. We knew that band inside out. So we kept doing that and kept promoting that. What's sort of happening now is that audience is dying. I always say the earth is flat. So the 60s rockers are falling off the end of the earth. So you don't see as big a sales anymore because my audience is disappearing. What's sort of helping to promote that history is the kids are buying vinyl. And luckily we have a vinyl shop in the neighborhood here, a record center. So what's happening is I've seen kids come in with their dad. And the dad say, hey, do you have any Beatles shirts? Do you have any CBGB? Do you have any of this? I said, well, why? He said, well, because my daughter's into it. She's wearing my T-shirt. So slowly it's coming back, right? The kids are, I think, getting fed up with the generic music that's out there. And they want to click into something that, first of all, links them to their parents, something that they thoroughly enjoy now, and maybe they're passing it on to their grandkids. Pandemic has been a couple of things, definitely hard on everybody. So much messaging that's out there that people don't understand, stats that every day, Jesus Murphy, like I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff, right? So really it was just trying to understand where we were going to go from there. The city of Ottawa all of a sudden said, everybody's got to wear a mask. You got to wear it on the bus. People were scrambling, okay? And I had, the store next door had really big windows, so I just flooded the window with masks. Well, that was the activity that saved the business. People were coming in buying 2, 3, 4 masks at a time at $20 a pop here. But my masks were so different. They were the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Queen, all the pop culture. Everything else out there was medical masks. And right, so people said, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show my rock and roll. So it became the new T-shirt as far as I'm concerned. Well, what I've done, I'm Hindenburg. I'm now at 1114A Wellington Street, which is next door to the Fab Gear store. And the reason I've changed names, I've rebranded the store, is because I was planning on retiring. And in December, I go, oh, I'm not going to retire. But I've committed to changing what the store's about. So I came up with a new name, Fab Gear's Rock Shop, where legends are dressed. And essentially get that message out. I prefer, if the shirt don't fit, you come in, you try another one on. People like to feel the fabrics with clothing. It's amazing. You'll come in and go, oh, I love that. Oh, can I try this? So that's the big difference. I'm not out to make $1 gazillion. I stick the way I am, old school. I take cash, we take cards. Come on in and talk to the owner.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Councillor Scott Moffatt joins me this morning. He chairs the Environment Committee for the City Council. Good morning, Councillor.
Good morning, Robert. How are you this morning?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I am good, thank you.
You're well? Family's well?
We're getting there. Yeah,
getting
we're
there.
doing
That's good. That's good. Hopefully we're in the final innings of this, but we're not quite there yet. Now, the reason for our conversation, I thank you for making time for us this morning. I know it's a busy morning for you.
Oh, it's okay.
$448,000 spent by the city for market research and advertising for the oft criticized, much maligned green bin program. What did the city get for that money?
Well, I mean, you might remember that we did a Hill Knowlton study a couple years ago as well, trying to figure out where best to go with waste, what the attitudes are towards waste.
Yeah.
And when we added the plastic bags to the green bin, we saw some uptake in it, but we also know that there was some COVID uptake as well with the shift from sort of industrial commercial waste over to the residential sector. But we needed to know what was going on. You know, we need more information. We're in the midst of a review of our entire solid waste master plan. You know, where are we going the next 20, 30 years with handling waste? We need to know what's actually happening on the ground, and it's not good enough to just get some empirical evidence of, well, I drive down the road and see a few green bins, or I don't see a few green bins. We need more for that. So Hill Knowlton was commissioned to give us a bit more data, some stuff that we can really sort of wrap our heads around and will help us with some of the decision making that we need to make in the coming weeks and months. Because we have a big meeting coming up in June at Environment Committee on the solid waste master plan, following up to what's coming in next week, where we talk about the green bin program.
So what do you know now that, say, you didn't know a few months ago on the green bin program?
There was a lot of concern about the adding the plastic bags. One, you know, will it actually lead to more people using the green bin?
Yeah.
And then the other concern was, will it impact the quality of the
compost?
Of the compost. And, you know, what we found is that we have seen a lot of people start to use the green bin that hadn't. We've seen more requests for green bins, for additional green bins. The concern that people had with why they weren't using it is no longer because it's messy and yucky. It's because of access, or they just forgot. So those types of things that's important to know, right? Those are things that we didn't know. And now that we have that, we know that we did make the right choice to add plastic bags to the green bin to make it easier for people. Because everything that we do has to be making it easier for the customer at the end of the day to use the product to reduce the pressure.
Trying to make it more user-friendly, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you say forgot, you forgot they can't put plastic bags with pet waste they can put that in, or just forgot that it's green bin day, forgot what?
I think it's something, you know, you clean out the fridge and you just toss it in a garbage bag and you put it out, you know, that kind of thing. Maybe, you know, there's no question it takes a little bit of extra effort, right? Maybe you have the head of lettuce wrapped in, you know, shredded plastic kind of thing.
Right.
Maybe you undo the plastic, throw the head of lettuce in. Maybe it's just easier to toss it in the garbage bag, right? So I think it's that type of thing. It's just sometimes it's convenient to just throw it in a black garbage bag.
Okay. It seems from the outset, and this program has been running more than a decade now, right? So, and it's had its issues, no doubt. And the long-standing one is uptake for multi-residential buildings, apartment buildings, condo towers, rows and towns, these sorts of things. What's been done? What more can we do to increase uptake in those types of living arrangements, those types of dwellings, Councillor?
So desire's there. You know, we see that in the studies that we do. We know that the residents in those buildings want to use the green bin, and we know more are using the green bin. We know more buildings are offering the ability to use the green bin. But it's really, for them, it's really that access issue. It's, you know, these buildings were designed with garbage chutes years ago. They're designed to make it very easy to get rid of just regular old garbage. But there's some effort required to get rid of organic waste and even recycling. So, you know, we need to work within that. We have a multi-residential, you know, garbage sort of working group that we have with a number of stakeholders from across the city that do work with city staff on looking at some of these issues and developing solutions. You know, clearly when it comes to building new buildings, we need to keep this in mind. We need to make it easier for people to be able to divert their waste, because there's a lot of waste that comes from this sector, and we're only going to see more
From a design point of view, even from a planning point of view.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. From how does your building code set up? How does your structure of the building set up where it makes it easier for people to just throw away the green bin products? Right now, it's not that easy. So we do see some uptake. We're seeing more. There are more building owners coming on board. The residents are pushing for it in those buildings. Yeah. But we definitely need to see more progress on that.
Okay. Now, from a property owner standpoint or property manager's standpoint, is compliance with, say, organics recycling, is it mandatory?
It's not in multi-residential.
Do you think it should be? Maybe it should be.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make sure that it's possible, right? I mean, there are some buildings where the footprint isn't there. You can go and make it mandatory all you want, but I mean, if all you're doing is creating a scenario where the only option is to find the owner, I don't really know if that's actually getting the result you want in the end. So the collaborative approach is the best approach at this point. And if in the end we find there's individuals that maybe aren't collaborating, they just don't want to do this just because it's going to cost them or something, then maybe there is more punitive measures to look at. But ultimately, I think we know there are challenges in these properties. They just aren't designed for this.
Okay.
And we need to work with them on that.
Okay, so bigger term, longer term, bigger picture when it comes to the master plan itself. The garbage and recycling master plan, waste management master plan. What are some of the, say, bullet point form, some of the big issues?
Well, big issue is obviously that diversion piece. We know that there's going to be some changes coming, banning organics from landfills. How are we managing that? What are we doing to ensure that's going to happen? So that's going to be looked at in the master plan. What are the options to better control that volume of waste that's going to the wrong place? Then it's the landfill itself. What's the lifespan of that landfill? What are we doing to extend the life? What are we doing to process waste? Not by landfill, but by other options. And we've seen some creative ways that other communities, other countries have done. I attended a webinar recently with the Dutch consulate that showed that they've actually created almost like an incubator type of situation in their country where it's almost like Invest Ottawa. They have entrepreneurs come in and show how they can process waste.
Oh, okay.
So instead of the city getting into bed with Plasco for 10 years and having that go nowhere,
right?
You bring in 4 or 5 potential options and have them compete against one another to see who can do it best. And if in the end it's more than one solution, it's more than one solution. We have a lot of waste to process.
Yes.
Most of these startups can't even fathom the amount of garbage that we have.
It seems that one of the trends, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is why does it even have to be a Ottawa go-it-alone solution? Can Ottawa partner with other municipalities in Eastern Ontario, West Quebec, and on a regional type solution, right?
We know they've reached out to us. In many cases, they've reached out to us because they want to be a host site for a new landfill or an incinerator, but they don't have the volume. They need Ottawa's waste. I'd prefer to solve Ottawa's waste in Ottawa as opposed to send this out to a neighboring municipality.
Okay.
But there's no question that there should be some collaboration between municipalities. We'll have more volume than any of them combined. So it's not the GTA, right, where you can have collaboration between York and Durham. It's different here, but we're already collaborating with North Grenville now on the green bin program. They've launched a green bin program, and they use our contract. So this is something that can be done and should be done. We should be looking regionally. But there's no question that Ottawa is the one that's going to produce the most waste. We have the biggest problem to solve.
Sure. Hey, thanks for the time this morning.
No problem. Thanks.
Greatly appreciated. Councillor Scott Moffatt chairs the Environment Committee, and he's the city councillor for Rideau-Goulbourn Ward. Professor Ian Lee, right after the news here on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, May 11th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 7 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. More essential workers and people with underlying health conditions may now register for a COVID vaccine through the provincial portal. As of 8 o'clock this morning, the province expanded the list to people like those who work in grocery stores. Starting on Thursday, the province-wide vaccine appointments will be open to anyone age 40 and over. Some regions, though, opening up even more. Anyone in Waterloo region, for example, who's 12 years of age or older will be allowed to register for their shot. That will be administered sometime, according to that health unit, in the next 4 to 6 weeks. A new 31-year study finds that cardiovascular risk factors increase from childhood to adulthood. There is also a decrease in cognitive function. Researchers followed more than 2,000 children who were age 3 to 18. Based on tests, they found those who were exposed to high systolic blood pressure and high cholesterol had worse midlife episodic memory and associated learning. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
He is the poor professor from the Glebe, Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, welcome back. It's great to hear from you. I was hoping we could start with what I call the harsh dose of reality for Newfoundland and Labrador. This is a report from Moya Green. She was tapped by the Premier, Andrew Furey, as a volunteer to chair that province's economic recovery team. And she lays it out, and she used to run the postal service in the UK and Canada Post here. So some serious business chops as well, and an understanding of government. And she says if you don't take some very, very harsh measures, Newfoundland will go broke. What do you think about this report, Professor?
Well, Newfoundland is broke. Okay. Newfoundland was broke. In fact, for the last 5 years, I've done periodic interviews, mostly with media from the Maritimes, including CBC and St. John's, that Newfoundland is insolvent. I didn't use the word bankrupt, so that some pedant doesn't write me and say provinces can't go bankrupt, which is true. A bankruptcy is a legal concept, and provinces cannot go bankrupt under the Bankruptcy Act. But insolvency is not the same thing. Insolvency, just so everybody understands, just means you are unable to meet your obligations, your payments, as they become due. In other words, you just don't have the money to pay your bills. That's a state of insolvency. It doesn't mean you're legally bankrupt and you're going to the bankruptcy court. It just means you're broke and you can't pay your bills on a regular basis. We're not talking about somebody who just, they lost their paycheck one month or something, or, they're off sick and they got time docked off. I'm talking on an ongoing basis. Your outflows are greater than your inflows, essentially. And Newfoundland and Labrador, if you use that definition or understanding, Newfoundland has been insolvent for quite some time. Let me just throw some numbers for you and everyone else, because the numbers are just, they're beyond mind-boggling, and they really are. There's no exaggeration here. And I'm going to compare it to the City of Ottawa, and I know the City of Ottawa is not a province. But remember, City of Ottawa has 1 million people. I'm not talking the Quebec side, the Gatineau side. I'm just talking the City of Ottawa.
Yes.
1 million people.
Yes.
And I think our long-term indebtedness is now up to, I think it's $3 billion, and there's been people tearing out their hair saying, oh my God, it's terrible, $3 billion. Mm-hmm. Newfoundland has half of the City of Ottawa's population, and Ms. Green says they owe $45 billion.
That's right.
How can 500,000 people owe $45 billion? I mean, it just boggles the mind.
Crazy, right? Yeah.
It's not possible. And so they are. I mean, they've always had a tough time on the rock, as it's called. And much as I am very sympathetic, and I've been there, it's a beautiful place, and the people are wonderful, and I don't have any animus against them. But I think that the whole saga of Newfoundland and Labrador, which occurred under both Liberal and Conservative premiers, is really instructive, Rob, for the going ahead, because it certainly flags or highlights the Parliamentary Budget Office statement in their January report this year that most of our provinces are unsustainable in the medium term. They didn't say insolvent. They didn't say bankrupt. They said unsustainable, meaning that their outflows are going to be consistently, their expenditures are going to be consistently larger than their revenues coming in.
Well, see, I guess here's what I want to know. Is this just a Newfoundland problem and it's terminally unique to Newfoundland, or can we take what's happening to Newfoundland and apply these conditions to other provinces?
Yes and no, and let me explain that, because I'm not sitting on the fence.
All right.
Yes, it's unique because Newfoundland only has 500,000 people. Okay, New Brunswick also has 500,000 people, and they've also got essentially the same problem as Newfoundland, by the way. So they don't have economies of scale. Ontario has a lot more runway. Their runway is much, much longer. They're 38% of Canada's population, 40% of the GDP, and their economy is, it's very, very
but we're
large.
also $400 billion in debt.
Exactly. True.
Yeah.
But my point is, the bigger you are, the more of a scale the more economies of scale you have, and so you can go a lot deeper into debt. Whereas the problem facing a very small market, and Newfoundland and Labrador is a market, is that it's mixed up with demography, it's mixed up with just plain old-fashioned human ambitions. If you're a young person and you're anywhere in Newfoundland and Labrador, the chances are pretty good you want to leave.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I was on the farm in the late 60s, and my biggest ambition was to get off the farm and go to the bright lights of Ottawa, which I thought was a huge, enormous megalopolis.
Well, yeah, when I got out of high school, I went to, an entire cohort of high school grads. It was, okay, bye, see you later. We're getting out of Atlantic Canada.
And the demographics show this conclusively. They've got I believe the oldest average population in Newfoundland and Labrador. They're losing young people like crazy. Older people, as we all know, and I'm one of them, consume a lot more health care than younger people, and the younger people aren't staying, and they're one lifeline, and they did have one lifeline after the cod fishery collapsed, which was the oil and gas in the offshore. And Mr. Trudeau is determined to shut down oil and gas eventually. We all know that. And we might as well speak truth to power and say, they're saying net zero 2050. So they're saying, don't count on oil and gas. You got to get off of that. Well, there's nothing else in Newfoundland. It's a rock. It's a giant rock sitting in the ocean. And, it's not an agricultural center. And the fish are gone. And so I think that the situation going forward is very, very dire, and it will involve eventually a federal bailout of some sort or another, even if they don't call it that. But to your larger question, Rob, very quickly, it is unique in that sense because it's very small.
Right.
In another sense, it's not unique. No. That is to say, it's bigger. The problem is bigger relatively.
Okay, but, here I think some of the similarities. For example, public sector salaries consume 40 cents of every government dollar in Newfoundland. I wonder if we looked at that and, transposed that number onto Ontario. I wonder how public sector salaries consume 40 cents of every dollar in Ontario?
I'd have to look.
You'd have to look it up.
I don't want to mislead anybody. I don't have that metric at my
Population is aging. Healthcare costs are far outpacing any, say, consumer inflation, right?
Yes.
Healthcare inflation is a lot greater than, say, consumer inflation.
But the larger issue is that's facing the provinces, and this was the PBO's point in its paper or argument, is that they are saddled with essentially the most expensive costs compared to the federal level. They have to carry most of the cost of health care, which is approaching 50% of provincial government expenditures across Canada. In every province, it's approaching 50. They also have to carry social welfare, income support, if you want to use that word, and of course the education system. Yes, the federal government, I know, transfers money to the provinces for income support, to share costs, they provide some money for healthcare, some money for universities, and so forth. But the lion's share falls on the provinces, and they don't have a printing press. They don't have a Bank of Canada. They cannot print money. People think that there's no difference between the federal and the provincial, and that's just absolute nonsense. The government of Ontario, like the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, has to go to the bond market when they're running deficits and say, please, pretty please, will you buy our bonds? our government of Canada, our government of Ontario bonds, or our government of Newfoundland bonds. And if the market, as happened last year, the bond market said, you know what, Newfoundland, we look at you and you're just so deep in debt. You're just way too high risk. You're, in the language of consumers, you're a subprime borrower, big time, and we are just not going to lend you anymore by buying your bonds because we don't think you're going to pay us back.
We'll buy your bonds, but you have to pay us
exorbitant interest rate.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
So, very quickly, where I'm going with this is there's a day of reckoning coming, and I don't mean in 50 or 100 years. It's going to happen, I think, in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years in Canada at the provincial level. I'm not talking the federal. We're all focused on the federal level because they've gone deep into debt,
right.
and they have. They've reduced their wiggle room, but they've still got an awful lot of wiggle room because number one, they've got a printing press. The provincial governments don't have the same wiggle room, and they're running out of runway a lot more quickly than the feds because they've got bigger costs relatively. They've got all these massive costs relating to essentially social issues, healthcare, aging, education, income support, and they don't have the revenue streams of the federal, and they are running chronic deficits.
Yeah.
Most of the provinces, I think Quebec is the only exception, I think, I'd have to look it up again, but most of the provinces are running deficits year after year. They're living beyond their means. And at one point, there will be a crunch. They will hit a wall, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, it's coming. And that's what the PPO said in much more coded language.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Don Drummond's on my program this morning a little bit later, and this is very reminiscent of the report that he did for Delta McGuinty, right?
And Newfoundland's a lot smaller.
Sure.
500,000 people, half of Ottawa.
Yeah, but what do you think of some of the remedies? First of all, all the taxes, HST, gas tax, payroll tax, sin taxes, fees, fines, you got to raise all of that stuff. Pension reform. Pension reform is a big issue for provinces too. I mean, they're on the hook for massive pension obligations.
They are.
Wage freeze, rein in healthcare spending. There's not a big post-secondary footprint in Newfoundland. They have Memorial University, but they want to cut the annual grant to. This recommends cutting the annual grant to Memorial University, and massive privatization of all the Crown corporations: Liquor Board, Hydro Utility, Oil and Gas Corporation.
Rob, I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb and make a sort of a very big picture forecast.
Okay.
I don't believe that they can cut health care meaningfully. Okay, you just can't go to any municipality, any province, any part of Canada and say, oh, by the way, you needed that cancer operation or surgery. Well, we just don't have any money. Go home and die. We just can't do that.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they won't do some nipping and tweaking at the margins, but healthcare is basically going to get bigger, not smaller, because the population is getting older. So what's going to get cut? I think what's going to get cut, for sure, education, and I'm talking higher education. Memorial, they're talking a 30% cut to the fees, to the grants for Memorial. I think that's inevitable. Those more discretionary, and I know my colleagues in the university will say, what are you talking about? But it's not essential. You're not required to go by law to university. And in fact, if anybody wants the number, it's 60% of the Canadian high school population goes on to college and universities. That means 40% today across Canada do not. So the idea it's mandatory. Of course, it's a very good idea. Of course, I believe in universities. But at the end of the day, you have to make tough choices when you're in an insolvency situation, and that's the kind of thing that'll get cut. And I do predict they're going to be trimming pensions. If there's any country, any part of Canada where the precedent will be set first, pensions have always been sacrosanct. We can never cut pensions, the benefit. And I am predicting it's going to happen first in Newfoundland ahead of any other part of Canada, where they will say, look, we just don't have the money to pay you those very generous pensions that we promised you, and we're going to trim them, whether it's 5% or 10% at the margin. I don't mean they'll abolish them, but they will.
No. But for example, in Nova Scotia, many years ago now, under an NDP government, the NDP during the election campaign said we're all for continuing with the indexing of public sector pensions, and the moment they were elected, they ended the indexing of public sector pensions.
Yeah. So. That's the sort of, and wages. There's public servants can't be in a situation where they're being paid very, very generously, and the province is going over the cliff. I mean, there's going to be wage downsizing. They'll be cutting public servants, laying off public servants, and they will be cutting the wages of the existing public servants. And one more quick point, because you're from that part of the country, this will give added impetus to something that they've always fought against, they've talked about forever, but never done it, and that's a consolidation of the four maritime provinces.
Go away. No, never. I will never join them. Never. Stop it. Stop it. Don't be ridiculous.
Lack of money is
you're being ridiculous.
Is an amazing discipline, you know.
No way. No way. Okay. When we come back, I want to get into this idea of a waiver for the patent protection for COVID-19 vaccines and get your take on protections for intellectual property.
Yes, I really want to talk about that.
Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. You know, there's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. You know, then customer service. You know, we're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not. If you ask for something, they're not going to point. It's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there. Okay. If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers, and we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, you know, can you try getting me this? You know, can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now. Okay, so we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them. That like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, from like all over the world, and we source it through distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. It's nothing really complicated about that. We turn over a lot of product. We package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You're always going to buy, Cuddy turkey breast, San Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here, okay? Not only baked, made, like, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread, okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. Your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag, you open it up and you throw it in the bin. Takes, 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
We're back with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. There is a push on to suspend the patents for COVID-19 vaccines. Suspend them. And potentially, let's say, for example, there are generic copies of these vaccines eventually manufactured. The generics would pay a royalty to the holders of the intellectual property, Pfizer, Moderna, whatever the case might be. What do you think about the plan? What do you think about that idea?
Just before I speak very bluntly, I will disclose I do not consult directly or indirectly to any of these companies, nor do I have any shares in these companies, but I am a very intensive user of cutting-edge drugs from the pharmaceutical companies for my rheumatoid arthritis because I have an aggressive form. I'm not going to go into the details, but I do, and I use very expensive drugs that have been developed and are very effective. So these drug companies have saved my life. I mean, have made my life functional, which it would not be otherwise. Now we've seen the emergence of these, and let me call them what they are, these parasite politicians. That's a phrase used by Karl Marx, and that's why I like to use it. These parasites are saying, let's rip off the copyright, just like downloading songs illegally or movies illegally, which the Liberals claim is wrong. And they said that, Facebook is linking to media, and that's wrong. They must be paying royalties because they shouldn't be ripping off the copyright. And yet there are people advocating that we take the copyright away, the patent away, which was granted under the laws of the land. We are a rule of law country. And it's it's what encourages the drug companies to do research. I went and looked up some numbers.
Okay.
This is U.S. data because that's where the lion's share of pharmaceutical research in the world takes place. From 1990 to 2019, they went from 17% of revenue spent on R&D. Year by year, it went up, and now it's up to 22%. Why I mention this is that many Canadians, and Don Drummond talked about this a little while ago, I know he's coming up in your program, about how Canadian companies and Canada consistently under-invests in R&D. And we say this is absolutely crucial for innovation, because innovation and R&D are very tightly linked. R&D produces innovation. And so the drug companies have been unbelievably successful at coming up with cutting-edge new drugs for cancer, heart attack, stroke. They're working now on Alzheimer's. Of course, rheumatoid arthritis compared to 30 years ago when I first was diagnosed, the efficacy, the success rate of these drugs at suppressing the arthritis has just gone through the roof as they spent gargantuan amounts. In terms of the raw data, the U.S. spends over $80 billion, which is just an astonishing amount of money on R&D. And so these parasites are saying, let's take away the copyright. Let's take away their right to get their money back that they spent, the billions.
Suspend it.
Yeah, and by the way, the FDA says that to develop one new product to market, and it takes 7 to 8 years, by the way, is the average, from the beginning of going into the pipeline to the time you get FDA approval, it's about 8 years. And it's about $1.5 billion for one drug. And the FDA is successfully approved. And the FDA also states that only 2 to 4 drugs per 100 drugs that start out in the pipeline ever make it, because the rest fall by the wayside because of testing. Things are revealed that do not allow the drug to go forward. So in other words, that 1 or 2 or 3 drugs that are successful have to carry the cost of all the failed drugs that failed during the R&D process.
Yeah.
And so my point being that our drugs are very high tech. They're very, very expensive. $1.5 billion a drug. And so these parasites out there, I'm using it repeatedly because I want people to remember this,
yes, you are.
What they're doing is saying, let's take away the incentive of these companies to spend billions and billions of dollars where only 2 or 3 of the drugs per 100 drugs initiated even are successful in the first place. In other words, a very high-risk industry. And let's make it super high risk, because we're now telling them, oh, by the way, when you spend all that money, we're going to come along and change the rules after the game has started, and we're going to take away your patent so you can't even get your money back. This is madness. This is absolute madness. These people advocating this are a threat to my personal health. I am dependent on these drug companies for new cutting-edge drugs. Anybody out there who has cancer has been diagnosed, you are dependent on cutting-edge drugs. Anyone out there who's had a stroke, you're dependent on it. So the next time you hear one of these politicians, one of these parasites saying this, write them right away and tell them, get your hands off my body. Get your hands off my health. You are hurting my health. That's what they're doing. Wow. And this is why I'm so passionate on this.
You are very passionate.
This drives me crazy. And I know the pain I've gone through with 30 years of aggressive rheumatoid arthritis. Right. And the only reason I can function is because of these drugs. Biologics, they're called, by the way, and they're really expensive.
Right.
And I don't begrudge 1 penny.
Okay. All right. Okay. Does this weaken the argument, though? Moderna, just take Moderna, for example, took $1 billion from the government to develop this vaccine. Does that weaken the claim to
times?
Right.
Government should not be picking winners and losers.
Right. Well,
They're
in this case, the government, but okay, they picked a winner here, and they threw $1 billion at the Moderna technology, and the Moderna.
My answer is go and tell them you want the money back. When you grant this money, there should be a repayment built into the grant. That's what we did with the GM bailout.
Okay.
We said, now, whether they pay it back or not is a separate question. That's a collection problem. But you can structure it and say, and they've done this, for example, with the Defense Productivity Grants, their so-called DIP program. I think it's called DIP, DIPP, Defense Industry Productivity. And they tie them to profits. So if you make money, you have to pay back a percentage of the profits of the money you got as the grant. Okay. So you can make these grants repayable. In fact, under the WTO, the World Trade Organization treaty, you can no longer directly subsidize per se. You can't just throw money at companies. They have to be, as I understand it, repayable, or at least nominally, ostensibly repayable. So if we're that concerned about the money that we gave to Moderna, well, then make the grants repayable in the first place. If that's getting some people's knickers and they're not saying, well, we put money in, great, make it repayable. I want to get this across again, everybody.
Right.
Drug creation of new drugs, I'm not talking the generics,
right,
is really high risk. And if you think that those people with PhDs in biochemistry from world-class universities are working for minimum wage, you don't have a clue what you're talking about. I have a friend who graduated, she did her undergrad at McGill, biochemistry, went to Cambridge. This was about 25 years ago, and early 90s. She graduated, and she didn't want to become a professor right away. She eventually did. And so she went off to work for, I think it was Hoffman, La Roche in Switzerland, excuse me. And she was making $150,000 US in 1990 as a researcher in the laboratory.
Wow.
This was when professors were making like $50,000.
Wow.
And these researchers are really, really expensive because they're really highly, highly educated STEM graduates. And so these parasite politicians are trying to undermine the very model that has produced all these remarkable drugs that have saved so many lives.
Okay.
In all of these different disease areas. So this is snake oil from snake oil salesmen.
All right.
Run in the opposite direction and condemn them with the strongest words possible.
As I believe you did this morning.
I think I did.
We will wrap it up there. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Right. Bye.
Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Talkback Hour is coming up next. Lockdowns, cost of living, lots of things to get into this morning. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, May 11th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 7 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Another dramatic drop in the number of cases of COVID-19 in the province today, dropping by about 700 from yesterday. 2,073 cases today, along with 15 more deaths. Now, the positivity rate is at 8.5% from just over 28,000 tests that were completed. Locally, there are 77 more cases in Ottawa, 3 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 2 each in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and Renfrew County. Now, the pandemic is taking its toll on Renfrew County, experiencing a recent spike in COVID-19 cases. Here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
In the midst of a stay-at-home order, Dr. Robert Cushman providing a snapshot of what the virus looks like in his region.
April was our worst month ever, and we had roughly 160 cases, and we're off to a bad start, a really bad start in May. So it's not good. It's terrible.
The acting medical officer of health says he would absolutely support an extension to the restrictions and notes that the spike in April primarily due to 3 factors: entire families not having been vaccinated yet, variants of concerns, and the lackadaisical attitude of a number of workplaces which have led to several outbreaks. On the flip side, he says by the end of the week, half of the population will have received 1 dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Chris Curries, City News.
Now, the province is opening up vaccine appointments for more essential workers and some more with specific medical conditions. That happened at 8 o'clock this morning. One area in the province, though, has already opened up their booking system to anyone over the age of 12. This is Waterloo Region. The actual appointments won't be filled for a month to 6 weeks' time, but they are accepting those appointments now, anyone over 12. The province is going to open up the vaccine appointment to anyone over the age of 40 coming up on Thursday. Here's City News reporter Irene Precklett.
People with at-risk conditions can now book their appointment. Among those conditions, diabetes and dementia. Another group of people who cannot work from home, including grocery store, restaurant, transportation workers, also eligible to book a shot today. And then on Thursday, anyone 40 or older can book a shot on the provincial portal. Ontario says it expects 65% of adults to have their first dose by the end of this month. More than 6.2 million shots already in arms. Meanwhile, 2,716 new cases yesterday. Testing was down, but the 9.1 positivity rate is lower than the previous 2 Mondays. There were also declines in hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and the number of people needing a ventilator to breathe. I'm Irene Precklett.
City News time at 10:04. Now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
One more cool and unsettled day, and then a weather pattern change for us. We start to turn things around. Some showers today, gusty wind, and the high only 9 degrees. 5 for the low, will clear overnight, and tomorrow mainly sunny, milder up to 17. For today, the high only 9.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 7 degrees. A new 31-year study finds that as cardiovascular risk factors increase from childhood to adulthood, there's also a decrease in cognitive function. Researchers followed more than 2,000 children who were between the ages of 3 and 18. Based on tests, they found those who were exposed to high systolic blood pressure and high cholesterol had worse midlife, episodic memory, and associative learning. Those exposed to childhood overweight and obesity had worse visual processing and sustained attention as well. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
2 issues in the mix that I want to run by you, and it'll only work if you participate in the program, so I hope you will. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. It's your hour. It belongs to you. Love to hear from you. Rob Snow Show, City News Talk Back Hour. First of all, the lockdown, okay? We talked about this yesterday. We should jump back into it today. There's a little more information today than there was yesterday because it sounds like the Ontario lockdown is going to be extended. I don't think that's a big surprise. It's going to be extended if the media reports are accurate at all, and why wouldn't they be? 3 weeks, at least another 3 weeks. Okay, the case count, you heard it in our newscast today, 77 for Ottawa, 2,073 province-wide, and 15 more people in the province of Ontario have died from COVID-19. In all of the UK yesterday, nobody died. In the entire UK, nobody died yesterday from COVID-19. 15 people in the province of Ontario. Lockdown. We've been under lockdown in Ontario since April 7th. If the decision is to extend this current lockdown, stay-at-home order, state of emergency for another 3 weeks, do you agree or disagree with that decision from Doug Ford? Instead of the lockdown ending May 20th, it would be June 2nd, June 3rd, something like that. What do you think of extending the lockdown for another 3 weeks? Issue number one. And issue number two is simply the cost of living. The cost of living. Give me some examples of price increases that you have noticed. The cost of living. Inflation, all over the news now. Inflation is coming back. Inflation is roaring back. The stock market, financial market obsession this week is inflation. Now, officially, the official government number from the fine people at Statistics Canada, officially, it says the inflation rate is 2.2%. So the so-called cost of living is increasing at an annualized rate of 2.2%. What do you think of that number? And what do you think of that number? If I said to you, David, welcome back, by the way.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay. The cost of living has gone up 2.2% in the last year.
Yeah, right.
That's what you would say? Really? That's what you would say?
Anybody who thinks that hasn't been living.
Really? Okay.
All right,
so David doesn't buy it, okay? 2.2%. 2.2% is the official inflation rate from Statistics Canada. We had Philip Cross on our program, and he says that number is probably accurate. But, gosh, it's hard to believe. If it's accurate, it's just hard to believe. What do you think, folks? Does it sound about right? 2.2% cost of living? No, I don't think it's up even that much. I get some real bargains out there. Or are you kind of like David and are you kidding me? It's way higher than that. And, I'd love to hear some real life examples. Just to get your point across. You're out at the grocery store, you're out at the home improvement store, whatever the case might be, right? I don't know about you. To me, it seems to be getting more and more and more expensive to live in Justin Trudeau's world. It really hit me the other day. We were in the grocery store on the weekend, and I don't do the grocery shopping in our house. Chen does the grocery shopping in our house. And because we have this rule, only one person goes to the grocery store. And it's kind of a Thursday thing for her. But I wanted to go to the grocery store, so I said, we'll go on Saturday. 454 grams of butter. Now, I don't have a butter index, okay? I don't have butter on a chart, but butter was $6.84 for 454 grams. So basically, a pound of butter was almost $7. And I thought, butter? You're going to go broke if you're trying to keep myself in butter. $7 for a pound of butter. And I thought, my gosh, that's food inflation right there. I look at the price of gas. It's back up to $1.30. We've got this issue with Line 5 and the Colonial Pipeline. Reports out of Georgia, Atlanta gas stations are running out of gas. All kinds of stories about lumber, right? If you can find it at all, the price is through the roof. We have copper. Now, economists call copper the metal with the PhD in economics because copper is very important in the industrial economy. You think of all the copper that would be used in a new house or a new apartment building, a new infrastructure project. Well, copper prices are at an all-time high. Iron ore, which is so critical in the steel-making process. Same thing with iron ore. All the agricultural commodities. We talked about that last week. Corn prices, soybeans, wheat prices, all on the run. Pork prices are rallying now. Probably because people can't afford chicken anymore. They're opting for the other white meat, okay? Big price increases. And we all know about the housing boom. I mean, basically, you have to be a millionaire if you want to afford a house in any Canadian city. So with all of these price increases, how can anyone claim that inflation has been running at 2.2%? The cost of living has gone up 2% in the last year. I mean, if you laughed in my face, I wouldn't blame you. But again, this is why we do the Rob Snow Show, to get your take on things. 750-1310, 750-1310, and with that, I will turn the show over to you. I'm just going to wait here until somebody calls. Just a little wait. Somebody will call. Oh, I guess life is filled with bargains for everybody. Everybody's going to the dollar store. Everybody's going to Giant Tiger. Giant Tiger is expanding. They are going to build 300 stores. Lockdowns, another big news story. The lockdown in Ontario, the stay-at-home order, the state of emergency will be extended until June 2nd. It's like waiting for a parole hearing. It's like Shawshank. You know, your next shot at freedom is in another 3 weeks. What's your reaction to that news as well? I mean, it's all over the news. Is it the right course of action for the Doug Ford government to take? Do you disagree with it? Is it maybe you think it's time that we got out of this? Okay, start lifting the restrictions, start easing up on things, maybe even a little bit. I don't quite see it that way myself. But I would like to know what way you're leaning right now at 750-1310. My email address is therobsnowshow@ottawa.citynews.ca. Another 3 weeks of lockdown. David was a little extra cranky this morning. What did you play? 1 round of golf all season?
2.
2 rounds of golf.
One of them was in the rain.
And one was in the rain, right? So the long walk spoiled because it becomes a long, wet walk spoiled. Another 3 weeks of lockdown. I'll be honest, I don't know what choice the Premier has other than to extend these measures. I mean, it would be nice if Ontario was in a better place. But we're not. Well, we have to deal with reality, okay? And the reality is, we are where we are, ladies and gentlemen, we're not where we need to be. And the last thing I think Ontario needs, and you all know it, I'm open to being convinced to see it another way, but I think we all know the last thing we need to do right now is to loosen things up and have this virus come roaring back. And have a fourth wave. A fourth wave. And another lockdown. I mean, enough of the roller coaster, right? Don't you want to get off this ride? Open, close, open, close, open, close. There's only so much people can take. We're in this lockdown. Let's make it the last lockdown. We have vaccines. The pace of the rollout's been picking up of late. Let the vaccine program do its work. Stay hunkered down, and hopefully later next month, maybe. We've reached some kind of critical mass with the vaccines. And this will be the last lockdown that we have to deal with COVID-19. That would be my preferred course of action, but that's just me. I'd like to hear from you on lockdowns and on the cost of living. In the East End, Mary. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning. I have been a senior now. I'm 78.
78, okay.
My husband was in one home which almost died, which he has moved to a better home, which
good.
He is 10 years older than I am.
Okay.
And we should stop filling Trudeau's pockets and letting him pass laws that is not
the whole Parliament voting on.
Right.
Just the Liberals.
Okay.
The Liberals are filling. He is a millionaire to start with. He filled his family pockets. They're been vaccinated much before because he traveled with his mother out of state. My sister is still working for government, and she is up in the 70s, and she still didn't get her vaccination until Saturday, the first one. And the home in Kingston, where my niece works, was not, she did not, she's a first care worker in that home.
Yes.
She was not vaccinated till last week, and the home in Kingston was not vaccinated yet, and it was owned by Sienna, but different names. And same with my husband, and my uncle is in homes, and there better be, Trudeau's handing it to the millionaires and not
All right. So you're not impressed with the Prime Minister, Mary. I got you, Mary. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for the call. Thank you. Okay. 10:17, Rob Snow Talkback Hour. It's always an adventure, isn't it? This is City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online, and the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Right back to the phones here. 750-1310 Talk Back Hour, Rob Snow Show, City News. Chris, Ottawa. Good morning, Chris.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Oh, hanging in there, buddy. Yep.
I wanted to talk about inflation for a second.
Go right ahead. It's 2.2% according to Statistics Canada.
No, it's not actually.
It's not.
And
Okay.
the reason is because when they take that 2.2% number, they get that from a very select basket of goods
Right.
that they've determined are not volatile. For example, they strip out gasoline, right? But I don't know about you, Rob, but I paid like 68 cents a liter for a tank of gasoline back in March of last year. But now it's, like you said, $1.30. So
Yes, yeah.
if they included that, this number wouldn't be trusted and it'd be ridiculous. And so the average Canadian is, if they're buying gas or anything volatile, they are paying more than 2.2%. And furthermore, if you consider that in that basket of goods they're looking at is things like air travel, movie tickets. Like, nobody's doing that, or at least they aren't supposed to be doing that right now.
Yeah.
So those prices would be artificially low, which would lower the average as well. So figures lie and liars figure.
Okay.
People are paying more than 2.2%.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's just ridiculous.
But I mean, are you, say, awash in cash now, Chris, with your household budget compared to a year ago?
Yeah, there probably is more money kicking around.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. More disposable. You don't find life is getting more expensive, Chris? I just find it seems to be getting a little more expensive.
It is. That's the point I was making.
Yeah.
People,
Okay.
when you use this statistic, this 2.2%,
Yeah.
it doesn't include gas, right?
Right.
Gas is higher than it was.
Right.
It doesn't include, it does include things that are artificially cheap, like movie tickets and, airlines that people just aren't buying right now. So
Okay.
the true basket of goods that Canadians are buying
Yeah.
is not reflected in the basket of goods that the Bank of Canada uses to calculate 2.2%.
All right. Okay. All right, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
That's
Have a
Chris.
good one.
Yep. You too, sir. You too. Okay, Rodney in Ottawa. Rodney.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Rodney.
Hey, I'm going to try and tackle all three for you.
Okay,
and
two.
it was
Yeah, okay.
the lockdown.
Lockdown. Another 3 weeks of lockdown. What do you think about that?
I think instead of picking a date, you can pick a date, but set a goal.
Set a goal. Okay.
Set a date and pick a goal.
Right.
Your goal is, so many positive a day and whatever percentage of...
Yeah, that's a good point, Rodney. Yeah.
And, pick it, and if the future doesn't look good, like the last time, when we almost got to 1,000 for a week, because we didn't get to 1,000 for a week, at that point in time, they should have looked at the future and said, we better hold on till we get to 500.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Hey, and then the next thing, cost of living.
The cost of living is up 2.2%, apparently.
Well...
Do you believe it, Rodney? Do you believe it? I mean...
No, because I'm just going to think of one pandemic item that after the pandemic came, my Hawkins cheesies, they went from $3.77 a bag to $4.77 a bag. Right. And you know what? Yeah. My COVID muscle does not have Hawkins cheesies in it because I just didn't buy any in the last year.
Okay.
So that was an answer to that.
All right.
Now,
okay.
The other interesting thing is going to be the price of gas.
Yeah, the price of gas.
And I'm just going to look back at some period of time back when the price of gas went up to $1.30, $1.40, and, I didn't pay that price. At that point in time, a barrel of oil was 126 Canadian when you converted it.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the exact price is today. I'm thinking it's around 65. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, it's between 50 and 60 right now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, that's even worse news because at 65, it's somewhere 85, 90, and we're back to $1.30 at the pumps.
Yeah.
But what the real issue...
I can understand inflation being higher because of higher gas prices. Don't get me wrong. Gas was basically on sale a year ago, right?
Well, I got it.
It was like 60 cents a liter last year. So.
Well, we're going to look at last year, but I really wanted to finish the price of gas.
Yeah.
Then, now,
yeah.
The price of engine oil. So the price of engine oil, price of gas has gone way down. The price of the barrel has gone way down. The price of the barrel went down so much that a year ago they were giving barrels away, and they gave you 11 cents for every 50-gallon barrel that you took. And I talked to my next-door neighbor who has a garage, and I told him, Simon, close the garage, get as much 50-gallon drums of oil as you can, refine it, make a refinery, and don't refine gas.
Well, you got a lot of great, crazy ideas out there sometimes, Rodney. I gotta go. No, I gotta go. You're way out of it today. $65 is the price of oil this morning. $65. Okay, $1.30 at the pump. Peter Castleman. Peter.
Hi, Rob. First-time caller.
Well, I appreciate it, Peter. Look, I'm just bringing it up, okay? StatsCan says the cost of living is 2.2%. The consumer price index is annualized 2.2% increase. Well, do you think that's an accurate number? That's all I want to know.
Not even close.
Okay, you think it's higher, right?
I do the groceries in my house.
Okay,
and
okay.
I just paid 10 minutes ago $1.29 a liter for gas. A head of broccoli at the grocery store, organic they call it,
yeah,
and $6.
$6
for and you're supposed to feed people and enjoy. The prices of meat have gone through the roof. Try and look at a good steak.
Okay, all right.
Definitely, I'm on a pension, and I got 2 part-time gigs to try and keep things going.
Well, I mean, we were in the grocery store on the weekend, and it didn't even seem to matter what now, I know dairy products, we have supply management, but nevertheless, it didn't matter what brand it was, no name or brand name. It was like $6.84 for 454 grams of butter.
It's insane. My son is in construction.
Yeah.
And sent me a picture of his truck loaded with $1,500 worth of lumber.
Right.
And you could probably put 4 times as much in the back of the pickup. And what's that for?
Yes.
And 3 weeks of a lumber yard shut down last March is not why we're still paying the prices that we are today.
No, it's demand. That's all demand driven, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The
more the demand, and they're driving prices up, and people are paying it.
Yes, they are. All right, sir. Thank you, Peter. Very eye-opening. Thank you. Great call. Call back anytime. Peter's first-time caller in Castleman. Just out of the $6 for broccoli. Okay? What if I want butter on my broccoli? It's going to be a $15 meal or what? The cost of living is 2.2% according to StatsCan. You buy that, you call me. 750-1310. Rob Snow Show, City News.
News in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, May 11th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 7 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 8. Here's what's making news this hour. COVID case numbers continue dropping in Ontario. Province-wide, just over 2,000 cases. Ottawa dipped below 100, now at 77 new cases today. In the rest of our region, 3 in Eastern Ontario, 2 each in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and Renfrew County. The case numbers do come provincially from over 28,000 completed tests. There are also 15 more deaths reported by the province today attributed to COVID. Restaurant workers, grocery store employees among those who can book their COVID vaccine now. That started this morning at 8. The province is also dropping the age for anyone province-wide to register for their vaccine on Thursday to 40. The situation in India going from bad to worse. Reports coming in today, scores of dead found floating in the Ganges River. India continues battling a surge in coronavirus infections. Another 390,000 cases today with 3,800 more deaths. And the SIU has determined a belligerent man in Rockland punched several times by police while being arrested last November and suffering a broken nose was not the victim of any criminal wrongdoing. More on this story coming up at 11 o'clock. City News Time at 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Second half of the Talk Back Hour. Talk about lockdowns. The cost of living in Justin Trudeau's world. It's only 2.2% more. You hardly notice it. The inflation rate is 2.2%, according to Statistics Canada. And on lockdowns, my buddy Brian Lilly, column in The Sun today, says basically that Premier Ford's made up his mind already. And the lockdown will be extended until June 2nd, June 3rd, around there. If you want to comment on that, the stay-at-home order under the best-case scenario wouldn't be lifted until June 3rd. Quote from Lilly in The Sun today, we were supposed to get our first taste of freedom, or at least a loosening of restrictions on May 20th, but with cases still too high, hospitalizations not coming down fast enough, no one thinks the order will be allowed to expire fewer than 10 days from now. He goes on, for parents, the big news is that school will not be returning to in-person learning during a stay-at-home order, and that means we're highly unlikely to see kids back in the classroom before September. Also, unlikely to see the resumption of kids' sports, be it soccer, hockey, karate. Sports simply won't happen as long as the stay-at-home order persists and will likely take some time to resume after it's lifted. And yes, for all the golfers out there, you won't be getting a tee time in the near future. To break that to you, Dave.
I'm rattled.
You're going to have to, I hate to break it to you, David, you may have to drive all the way to Gatineau if you want to play golf. I know, it's tough. It's tough.
That's unacceptable. Yeah. It's unacceptable.
Well, you've got to you've got to navigate the blockades, right? So, yeah.
You got to time it right.
But my question is that the right decision, just given where we are right now with this blasted third wave, 2,073 cases. Imagine 2,000 cases looks like a good number. Used to be a time when that kind of number would come out and be horrifying. But it wasn't that long ago we were nudging up against 5,000 cases a day, so now I guess 2,000 is a good number. The province's medical officer of health, Dr. David Williams, we have some clips here, said yesterday he doesn't think any restrictions should be eased until the case counts are down below 1,000 a day.
We're looking at that. I know after the first wave, and I was talking then about getting below 1,000 cases per day for a number of days. In the end of the second wave, we got down to 1,000 for about 4 or 5 days, and then it went right back up again. So we never did have that long period of numbers well below 1,000 to bring our ICU numbers back down to the baseline of 150 or less. The challenge now we're dealing with variants of concern, and they are by far the predominant. That means their propensity to spread is much higher. And so I think our target, in my mind, has to be lower than that 1,000. We're trying to talk with our public health measures table to say what that might be.
So we have work to do. And no taste of added freedom for another 3 weeks, and who knows, maybe longer than that. I hope that's all it takes. My gosh, it's hard to endure, isn't it? I would like to think that we could vaccinate a great many people in Ontario over the next 3 weeks. The case counts will fall dramatically, and the number of people ending up in the hospital will fall dramatically come early June, and we're all in a much better place, and life can get back to normal. But I would like to know what you think this morning. Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour. John, Carlsbad Springs. John.
Hey.
Hey, John.
I'm caller.
Well, I appreciate that, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just, I had the Economist on earlier today. I'm just trying to figure out in my mind how the inflation works. When you could get a mortgage, with an interest rate of 1.8.
Yep.
But then the inflation is 2.2.
Yeah, and the house is $1 million.
Yeah, so this is just going to create a bigger divide between the rich and poor.
Right.
Because if you own a house, you're making money by being in debt, in a sense, right?
Well, the asset is appreciating.
Not only that, it's hedging your, because you're borrowing the money for less than it's becoming more worthless, right?
Okay.
So even if you bought gold or something on credit, wouldn't you be...
Well, as long as the value of the gold increases, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe that's probably part of the reason why, there's such a increase in housing and all that too, right? It's not only, low interest rates.
Well, I guess I don't want to get into these kind of, esoteric economic theory arguments. But what I want to get into is what's just your own experience in your own everyday life.
Well, I'm a heating contractor, and I've seen the price of wire and anything copper gone up
crazy,
more than 50%.
More than 50%, right?
Yeah, from last year.
And you would use a lot. I suspect you would use a lot of that in your trade, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I guess that's it.
And if you talk to a lot of your colleagues in the building trades, they'd probably tell you the same story about whatever supplies they're trying to buy, right?
All of the builders now have very top security. Anyone trying to steal a 2x4 or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? They send the security guy right away now.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So,
okay, they're keeping an eye on that. Okay, isn't that interesting? Okay. All right, John. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, good. Let's take Darlene's call. Darlene.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, Darlene. Good. Nice to hear your voice, by the way.
Thank you. It's always nice to talk to you. I'm really applaud Premier Ford for extending the lockdown.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of people like me. I will not go back into the hospital. And it doesn't, you only have to read and look at a few pictures. And I don't want to go there. And there's a lot of people that don't want to go there. Because I honestly feel that if you go into hospital, your chances, they're not good now. All the surgeries that have been canceled.
Yes, it's terrible.
Really a dire strait. And we can't count. I think Premier Ford, he counted on people to do the right thing, wear their masks, just all the simple hand washing and, all the necessary things. Go get your vaccine.
Yeah.
And you can't. The majority of people, they're going to do the right thing, but it only takes a few hundred, and we're at, a few thousand. We're right at where we are now.
Yeah.
So, I don't mind staying in.
Yes.
And, self-isolating. But Trudeau has got to stop all borders. He doesn't do the right thing. He's in the column of the ones that doesn't do the right thing, unless maybe he's caught, But the borders have to be closed, for God's sakes. You can't bring people in. It's a pandemic. It's not a cold virus. Just look at India. What's happening?
Yes, it's terrible. Yeah, and they thought they had it under control.
Well,
and it came roaring back.
Opened it up, right?
Yeah.
And had a festival, and people were in the streets and celebrating.
Yes.
Bang, right back to day one and worse.
Oh, yeah, worse than it's ever been.
Oh, I know it's.
Yeah, it's a 3. I heard on the radio this morning on my way into work, it's like 300, more than 300,000 cases every day for the last more than 20 days.
That's right, and it went from 200,000 to 300,000. Bang.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's the first time my son lives in Edmonton. It's the first time I've heard him use such strong language. Jason Kenney is out.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. The feelings against him are so strong.
Yes.
So I really hope we do the right thing. And I do applaud Ford because
Okay. You so an extension of 3 weeks, you think that's the right decision?
Oh, definitely.
All right, Darlene. Thank you for your call. Good to hear from you. Thank you again. Up next, Catherine in Centertown. Catherine.
Yes, good morning.
Hi, Catherine.
First call.
First time caller?
Yes.
Well, what took you so long? I've been sitting here all this time.
I listen every day.
Good for you. No, I'm just teasing. Thank you so much. So, Catherine, the government says, by way of Statistics Canada...
I've got a number for you.
You got a number for me. Okay.
It moves the decimal point over 1. It's more like between 22 and 30% increase for all of the things that I deal with every day.
Such as? Give me some examples.
Groceries. And I'm a senior, and I have a fairly... restrained routine these days, and I just go out for groceries and I pay bills like phone and utilities and things like that. But if you take into account everything, it definitely, I find at the end of every week or the end of every month, I'm spending maybe 30% more than
really,
and I'm not doing anything. Wow. I'm at home. And on the subject of staying at home, what's interesting is that I'm old enough to remember an era when we stayed at home. People did things with their families in their homes.
Yeah.
We didn't all have cars.
Yeah, but, Catherine, with all due respect, who wants to hang out with their family for 14 bloody months? Come on.
My family's all busy. But the thing is that life was simpler and sweeter. And we didn't have all of the gangsterism and all the trouble. Life was simpler.
Right.
And I wanted to come to Trudeau.
Yes, what about him? Let me guess. You think he's doing a great job?
I have been from the time that he was first elected.
Yeah.
Been keeping a list of all the things that he's done wrong.
Oh, really? Okay.
In the categories of ethical, fiduciary, political, and diplomatic faux pas. It's in the hundreds now. And he never gets caught out. And the reason I'm calling you is that I've finally been pushed to a limit. I'm looking at my Globe this morning, and at the bottom of the page, it tells how long the 2 Michaels have been in jail.
Yes, they keep track of that every day. Yeah.
Those men went over there on their own hook. I don't feel at all compelled to do anything about that.
Oh, really?
But I'll tell you, this morning, 200 and 50,000 people have died in our country on Trudeau's watch. And why are people not at the top of every paper, at the top of every newscast, running a band, telling people how many people have died in our country? This is just not acceptable.
Okay.
And it all boils down. You can talk about the lockdown.
Yep.
You can talk about the long-term care homes. All the things that people are cranky about, and it's a long list.
Yep.
But if we had that vaccine early, much earlier, we'd be in a different position.
And a more reliable supply of the vaccine.
Portugal, where I go for the winter, is open. They opened last Thursday.
Wow.
And, they control things. The police are in the streets, and people are obedient. But we have a disobedient prime minister. And when you set a moral, ethical tone like that, it filters down. And I just think we've got to stand up to what's going on with the current government. And the lies. Every day he stands up, the cheek. He stands up and lies. Every single day, trying to play yes minister, giving us something else to think about. He's constantly putting something out to distract us from the fact that people are dying. 8 pages of obits on Saturday in the newspaper.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Gotta go. Thank you. Thank you for your call. Don't make it the last one. Talkback Hour. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Everyone's got their own little dreams. I want to write the next novel. I want to write a screenplay, which I still want to do. So owning my own business is something I've always in the back of your mind. Oh yeah, that'd be really cool to try and do. I end up lost my job that I had for 20 years, and I found myself with nothing. Trying to figure out what am I going to do now. I'm mid-40s, and I got a lot of different experience, mainly in retail. So I figured, you know what, let's try to give this a go. I didn't really have any money. I started up with the little website. We went with that, and then it's kind of just grown from there. I have such a passion for this, it's not even work for me. This is a hobby that I get to, thankfully make a living off of. When you walk in, you're going to be overwhelmed, I think, with all the amount of licensed product that we have. I only sell licensed product. I don't sell anything no name or anything. Everything is 100% officially licensed, depending on the franchise. So I like to support a lot of different franchises, a lot of pop culture. So I do have a little bit of music, vinyl, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, you name it. There's probably something around, or if I don't have it, you let me know, and I'll do whatever I can to, try and find it for you. I do some comic books. A lot of the interesting things that I do are items that you just don't find anywhere else. I probably have the best selection of pop culture cookbooks. So cookbooks from Walking Dead and Downton Abbey and Orange is the New Black, Hannibal, Marvel, Wonder Woman. I've got the best selection of Star Trek ships in the city. Well, actually, I've got the best selection in the country. I'm the only retailer in Canada that deals directly with the company Eagle Moss. I've got the best variety of Pop Funko figures within the city. I got the best prices, hands down. Even some of my action figures that I sell that are available at Walmart and Toys R Us, I'm cheaper than them, which is a lot of times you don't realize it. So even that small business can offer you a great value.
To talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Again, coming up right after the 11 o'clock news, Financial Accountability Officer, Government of Ontario, Peter Weltman, on the medical procedures backlog. 3.5 years for surgeries, 3 years plus, not quite 3.5, but 3 years plus for diagnostic procedures. The government has budgeted about $600 million to deal with this, but the FAO says it's going to cost more than double that, $1.3 billion. And in addition to that, it notes that we have a healthcare spending shortfall of about $62 billion over 9 years. It's not a pretty picture for Ontario's healthcare system. So we'll get into all of that. Dr. Robert Cushman is the acting medical officer of health for Renfrew County District Health Unit. I spoke with him this morning. We'll talk about long-term care and criminal negligence. In a legal sense, what is it? If you were a prosecutor or an investigator, how would you go about trying to make the case? Emilie, Taman, Ottawa lawyer with Champ & Associates, former federal Crown prosecutor. will join me on that. And Don Drummond, former chief economist with the TD Bank, fellow in residence with the C.D. Howe Institute. He's with Queen's University. We're going to talk about that report out of Newfoundland, the Green Report, preaching fiscal restraint, lest Newfoundland become insolvent. So all of that is in the final hour of our program here on the Rob Snow Show. This is the Talkback Hour. We're talking lockdowns. We're talking the cost of living. We're talking all kinds of things with people like Karen in Stittsville. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Hi, Karen.
What I want to talk about is Trudeau said he was proud of his rollout. Like, how can it even be, like, why don't the reporters say what part of being proud of this is when, like what that lady said, so many Canadians are dying, close to 25,000 people. And the thing is people don't go on about that. They go on about the billions of vaccines that we're going to get, not that we have, that we're going to get. And I don't feel that the reporters are making him accountable. Like they're protecting him, which is really, really sad. And this has a life thing. It's not like it's a liberal or conservative. Like, I find he's being protected, and as soon as he does something wrong, he hides.
Okay.
Like the SNC, the We Charity, the Indian Clown, the Agacon, anything that he does.
You're keeping track, too. You have a list, too, Karen. You have a list, too.
I have a list. I help Pierre Poilievre. I help him.
Okay, all right, okay.
So I know. So, but it's not just because of him, because I didn't like Mulroney at the end. But I'm just saying he is the worst prime minister. And if his last name was not Trudeau, and the Canadians thought about it, his own Liberal Party would fire him. Because think of what literally he has done in the 6 years, just like Sagan. What has he done in 6 years? He should be fired. Even I find now Freelands, they're all yes people, and really they're lying every time they come out and speak, and it's sad because they were good people, but they're not ethical anymore.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
All right.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Not a lot of love for the Prime Minister on the Rob Snow Show today. Ooh, they're going after him. Blackburn Hamlet. Kathleen. Good morning, Kathleen.
Yes, Rob, again,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to repeat again. I realized I spoke to you on Friday, but
that's okay.
It is so important that our doctors, our nurses,
yes,
and all those people, our fire people, this isn't. I can't believe it that the doctors and the nurses have not all of them have not had their second shot, or maybe some of them haven't even had their first.
Yes. What is taking so long, right?
That's right.
Sure. Great point, and fair point by you, Kathleen.
Yeah. Come on, Justin. Get your act together. And the other thing is, I agree with that lady that listed all those things, but didn't he promise also that all seniors would get their mailbox or their mail delivered to their house going back?
We will restore door-to-door delivery of the mail. Sure, yeah.
We'll get you back your door-to-door delivery.
We will restore. The promise from the Liberals in 2015 was we will restore door-to-door delivery of the mail.
Right.
Right. Did you get yours back if it was taken
Well,
away?
I do not have a problem because we're on a fairly main street.
Right. Okay.
So, and I even have a postman who will take my outgoing mail.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Well, I have...
Now that's service.
Yes, this postman has informed me that if you put mail in your mailbox and it has a stamp on it, it now becomes property of Canada's Post, and they are obligated to take it and mail it.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
But I also, gave him a couple of Easter bunnies.
Okay. Like
Because
chocolate Easter bunnies, you mean?
Yes, I happen to find out he has a sweet tooth.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
But
so you're on his good side then.
Well, no, he's a great
good
young. Or no, he's been around. He's been around the block a number of times.
All right. Okay. Okay.
Rob, again,
yes,
exactly what that lady said. The Avacon and the trip to China, and the SNC Lavalin, and goes on and on and on. But people seem to forget. Okay, thank you, dear.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you. Okay. I'm not sure how we got on let's beat up on Trudeau today, but it's just kind of become let's beat up on Trudeau today.
That happens from time to time.
Tyler in Ottawa. Tyler.
Yep, how's it going?
Oh, it's going. Yes, it's going. Yeah, not fast enough some days. Tyler, go ahead. Lockdown, sir. The lockdown's going to last another 3 weeks. Is that Mr. Trudeau's fault?
I think there's a lot of moving parts to really be angry about. I mean, I give this virus all the respect in the world, but I kind of, I just opened up my own business last year. We literally signed the lease papers February of 2020, so this has been quite the...
great timing for you. Right.
But I think that what's been asked of us, especially as small business owners, contact tracing, making sure everybody's safe. I think that's been, chefs are known. We have prep lists. We're efficient. We're thorough. This vaccine rollout has just been deplorable, though. I mean, at the end of the day, Canada is a country that should be able to supply our citizens, and especially Ontario, we should be able to supply our citizens with the timing and the procedure of getting these vaccines going.
Yeah.
And I commend all of the frontline workers, the doctors, the nurses. I mean, it's a shame that, all these procedures are being held back so long. But the people making these decisions has just been head-shaking. And I think you have to really look at so many trickle-down factors of mental health and all these other things that come down to it that, I see people's faces and the relief of just not being, and I get it that, people, being home is commendable but it's the fact that we didn't get these shots in our arms soon enough. I mean, the states, my buddy just went down to Florida. He already has his. He's a dual citizen.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
3 weeks apart.
Yep, 3 weeks apart.
My little brother works at a long-term care home, and, it's a shot now and then a shot 4 months from now. Like, what are we doing here? I think that's the one thing I've asked myself this whole time. Like, what are we doing? I get that we have to do this right to get back to some normalcy, but the people making these decisions, you got to get these shots in people's arms, and that's where, to me, I think that my business could be thriving if the vaccine rollout was done with a lot more sense.
Okay, you hang in there. We got to go, Tyler. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you for your call. You call back anytime. That's it for the Talkback Hour today. Phone lines closed. Financial Accountability Officer for the province of Ontario. Coming right up on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, May 11th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 7 degrees. In Smith Falls, it's 8. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A dramatic drop in the number of cases province-wide today of COVID-19, a drop of about 700 from yesterday, with 2,073 more cases today, along with 15 more deaths. Now, the positivity rate is at 8.5% from just over 28,000 tests. Locally, 77 new cases in Ottawa, 3 in Eastern Ontario, 2 each in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and Renfrew County. Last month in Renfrew County, the health unit's worst month of the pandemic. City News reporter Chris Curry tells us the month of May picked up where April left off.
Calling April terrible, the region's acting medical officer of health points to 3 factors as to why. The variants of concern, families that haven't been vaccinated yet, and workplace outbreaks.
People are careless and carefree because when we look at these, what they're doing in these workplaces, we have serious concerns about their masking and their distancing and basically their precautions.
Dr. Robert Cushman telling City News Renfrew County needs to get a grip and limit the spread of the virus by getting vaccinated, of which there is a positive note.
The good news is by the end of the week, we're going to pass 50%.
And a few thousand have been fully vaccinated. Chris Curry's City News.
City News time, 11:02. And now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
One more cool and unsettled day and then a weather pattern change for us. We start to turn things around. Some showers today, gusty wind, and the high only 9 degrees. 5 for the low will clear overnight. And tomorrow, mainly sunny, milder up to 17. For today, the high only 9.
And right now in Ottawa, 7 degrees. In Smith Falls, it's 8. Vaccines, support for provinces, and aid for airports all expected to be in the spotlight as the Prime Minister holds his regular COVID briefing today.
When the Prime Minister takes the mic at his regular COVID news conference, I'm told he'll be giving an update on vaccines and discuss supports for provinces and territories. It's not clear if there will be anything new on those fronts, but Justin Trudeau will likely face questions about supply and possible mixing of second doses due to a shortage of deliveries of the AstraZeneca shot. But the Prime Minister is also expected to announce federal support for airports. The government will be launching a suite of programs aimed at helping airports access $740 million in supports. About 2/3 of the cash is going to larger airports, while the rest will go to smaller ones. The aviation industry has been among the hardest hit sectors during the COVID-19 pandemic. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News time, 11:03. The SIU has determined no charges warranted against OPP officers in Rockland after an incident in November last year. A man arrested for drunk driving was at the detachment and after receiving his release papers walked to the parking lot but became belligerent. The Special Investigations Unit said the suspect then threatened to kill officers. He was placed under arrest again and forced to the pavement. A physical altercation ensued. The man was punched, according to the SIU, multiple times in the face. He was handcuffed and taken to hospital for treatment. The SIU says there are no reasonable grounds to believe the officers committed a criminal offense. City News time, 11:04.
Where will you go now, Mr. Cow?
I cannot stay here. Peter said I could stay here.
Oh, gosh.
A wandering cow had to be removed from downtown Napanee. The OPP say they were called shortly after 6 after a cow wandered out of a trailer on Dundas Street. Police were able to corral the cow, returning it to the owner. No people or animals were harmed in the interaction. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
I'm pleased to welcome to the Rob Snow Show this morning on City News, Financial Accountability Officer, Province of Ontario, Peter Weltman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, nice to hear from you. So your office is out with a new report on healthcare commitments and healthcare spending. What did you look at?
We look at
This is a report that we do to support the MPPs who are members of the Standing Committee on Estimates, and their job is to review the government's spending plans for the upcoming years per ministry. So what we did is we looked at the Ministry of Health, and we looked at the overall ministry, and then we looked at specific sort of policy initiatives within that ministry.
Okay. So what specifically did you look at?
We looked at the spending plan of the the government for the ministry, and then we did our own cost estimate as to what it would cost to basically run the health program. Okay. We brought that out over the next 10 years, and we saw that there was a gap between what it costs to run the program as it currently is constructed against what the government has committed to
do. Yes. Okay. Committed to spend. Yes. Committed to spend. And what? There's a shortfall, right?
That's right.
And the cumulative shortfall is how much?
It's almost $62 billion over that 9-year period. So it's about, it starts slowly because there's a little bit of extra COVID spending that comes in this year. So the gap after 2 years is about 3.7, and then it accelerates out to the end of the decade.
And how do you explain this shortfall?
Well, we don't have to.
You don't have to. Okay,
we just put the analysis out there.
Okay.
So the easy explanation is what we do is we construct a model that looks at how the costs are derived, and really what drives healthcare is demographics, right? As people get older, they use more healthcare. People in a chair are getting older at a rapid rate. The other thing to keep in mind is that healthcare inflation is different than consumer product inflation. Healthcare inflation is on treatments, on supplies, on equipment is much higher. So those two things really drive the cost, and the government is trying to show a balanced budget by the end of the decade. In order to do that, they're basically saying our plan is to spend less on healthcare.
Spending restraint, right? Spending
However
restraint.
You want to term it.
Yeah, spending restraint measures will need to be introduced, is what your report says.
As I said, it's a demand-driven program. So if you're trying to figure out how to deliver to more people potentially more expensive care and spend less money doing it, you're going to have to figure out a way to change or modify or do some significant changes to the program to make it less costly to deliver.
I'm glad that you brought up healthcare inflation. That's something that we briefly mentioned this morning. We talked a lot about the consumer price index and the current inflationary environment this morning. Top of mind for a lot of people when they look at the price of gasoline and go shopping for groceries and whatnot. But you're right, there is another measure of inflation specifically tied to the delivery of healthcare. Ballpark figure, Mr. Weltman, what's that in an annualized
Well, we
rate
haven't.
these days?
I don't have it in front of me. We haven't broken it out. So overall, just to keep in mind, the program, the healthcare program, runs at about 4% per year.
Yeah.
Real cost growth. So that includes a combination of the healthcare inflation piece and the demographic growth piece. So if I remember, healthcare inflation is probably it probably runs. I would say safely runs around 4. 3.5 to 4. It's high.
It's high. Okay. Yeah. You also, this report looked at federal health transfers in support of provincial health care spending. Is that correct?
So I think just to add some context, so that was the overall piece, and then we looked at 3 what I would call policy issues that are, the government is tackling, and that was one of them, the health care transfer. The province has basically said through the Council of the Federation, which is the collection of provinces and their voice to Ottawa, that the federal government needs to kick in more money for offsetting healthcare costs, and they should be paying 35% of the cost. We did analysis to figure out, okay, well, what is actually, what is the current transfer amount paying right now? And we said it's around 25%. I think it's important to note it used to be down to 21% back in the 90s, early 90s, and the share has gone up largely because in Ontario, spending on hospitals has dropped. So it's not necessarily that the money has increased, it's just the costs. The amount of money the province has been spending has dropped, so the share of the federal transfer.
Therefore, the share of the federal transfer has increased, but not by much, from 21 to 25%.
No, exactly.
Okay. Now, let's get into something that's top of mind for a lot of people, and that's the backlog. What did you examine when it comes to surgical backlogs and backlogs in diagnostic procedures?
Yes, so we've actually been trying to do this for about a year. We were asked by an MPP to look at this last spring. We couldn't get the data. We tried again in the fall. We tried again in the winter, and now the data is available. So we're happy. We took another look, and what we see is what we've done is we've taken a look at the current backlog data and we projected forward. And our backlog data includes the most recent lockdown or postponement of elective surgeries, which was ordered in April. And our estimate is that by the end of September, we're looking at a surgery backlog of 419,000 procedures. So elective surgeries that won't be done that are going to need to be caught up with. Okay. And the diagnostic backlog, so diagnostic procedures, such as MRIs or
CTs, whatever.
Exactly,
yes.
Whatever. So we're looking at close to 2.5 million of those.
2.5 million?
Yes, 2.5 million by the end of September.
Backlogged.
That's right, backlog. And the reason is because they've had to shut, all these things require not just equipment, they require staff, they require space. And if all that space and staff time is being used by folks who are piling into the hospital because they're sick with COVID, then you don't have them available to do these other things.
419 so-called elective surgeries. Okay. Yeah, 419,000. Yeah, 419,000 elective surgery procedures.
Yes.
And on the diagnostic side, 2.5 million. That's the backlog. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we project to the end of September. So that's not today. That's to the end of the fall. And the reason we picked that number is because we hope that things will slowly be, getting back to normal by then.
Should be, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
How much will it cost to start catching up?
Well, we did our own estimate.
Yes.
And using what we know from the data, which shows us, how much does this, a certain procedure cost? Because those numbers are available publicly.
Yeah.
We estimated to clear the backlog of surgeries, it would be $1.1 billion. And to clear the diagnostic procedures backlog would be about $241 million. So total of $1.3 billion.
And how much is the government budgeted?
The province has allocated $610 million for both.
So less than half, then.
Not quite half of what we estimated to be. Now, two reasons for that. Well, at least one reason for that. One is that their number was basically put forward before the April 2021 postponement order. So it wouldn't include that. So that could be significant. I can't tell you the differences, but there would be some significant difference. So clearly they're going to have to sort of revise that number if their intention is to catch up.
And how long would it take to clear that backlogs?
So our estimate is 3.5 years to get rid of the surgery backlog and almost 3 years to get rid of the diagnostic backlog, and that assumes a certain kind of operating volume. So we're assuming that hospitals can operate at 11% above their pre-pandemic sort of surgery volume. So, if you go back, turn the clock back a little, go back before the pandemic, and then tell all the hospitals, okay, we need you to run at 11% higher elective surgery capacity than you've been up to date. Now, I'm not sure if you remember, but I don't know how doable that is. I mean, this government got elected on got elected a whole bunch of reasons, but one of their campaign promises was trying to end hallway healthcare.
Yes.
So there was an issue with capacity beforehand. And then, of course, you have the diagnostic procedures are going to need to be running at a little higher level than that, about 18%.
18%.
Yes, that's
okay.
Right.
All right. Lots of work to do. Thank you for your time this morning, Mr. Weltman.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
The Financial Accountability Officer of Ontario, Peter Weltman. Dr. Robert Cushman, Acting Medical Officer of Health, Renfrew County District Health Unit. My guest coming up next, Rob Snow Show here on City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names, the colors are fun, the logo is fun, and it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives, it's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them, and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is of course everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well, occasionally. We also have our pamper items. So your pamper items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. 2 other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes. They're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's get a snapshot of the COVID-19 situation in Renfrew County from the region's acting medical officer of health, Dr. Cushman. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I'll start with the good news and then go to the bad news.
All right.
The good news is by the end of the week, we're going to pass 50% of the targeted population, that's folks over the age of 18, over 50% will have had their first jab. So that's the good news. And a few thousand people will have had their second jab. That's people in long-term care, retirement homes, and the staff in those places. So that's the good news. Now, the bad news is that April was our worst month ever, and we had roughly 160 cases, and we're off to a bad start. A really bad start in May. And in fact, yesterday we posted 19 new cases. That was from Sunday. So it's not good. It's terrible.
So what's going on? What do you think is going on, Doctor?
Well, there are 3 things. One is the variants. They're much more contagious. And the second one is we're seeing this in workplaces and in families that haven't been vaccinated. And with respect to the workplaces, I'm not quite sure, but we really see a web. Renfrew County is small, so someone gets it in their workplace, they take it home, their spouse takes it into another workplace, their kid takes it to daycare. So we've got a lot of activity here. And I don't know what's going on, whether people, they need to go to work, they don't get a paycheck, maybe it's a sick leave issue, or maybe it's just that people are careless and carefree, because when we look at these, what they're doing in these workplaces, we have serious concerns about their masking and their distancing and basically their precautions. These are not tight workplaces.
Okay, so you said variants, workplaces, you said 3 things. What was the third one?
Well, they haven't been vaccinated. These are mostly, young working people, right? If you look at our vaccinations, we're moving sort of getting below the age of 55, so to speak. So in terms of when you think who's in the workplace, they're younger, and the chances are they haven't been vaccinated.
Okay. By all accounts, the provincial government is extend the stay-at-home order and the state of emergency for another 3 weeks. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm totally in agreement with that. I think it has to be done. Well, as I said, April was our worst month. We came, the first week of May was marginally better, but, the weekends on Saturday and then on Sunday, we basically had almost half as many cases in one day that we'd had the week before. So we're in trouble. We need to really get a grip. It's a war between the vaccines and COVID, basically, and we need to get our vaccination percentage up to about 70%, and at least really to start seeing a good solid difference. And also, we need to keep hard at it with respect to the precautions to limit the spread of the virus, because this virus is very wily. We're seeing families where, there's 80 to 100% infectious rate. We're seeing more workplaces now where you have a very high infection rate. We've seen, tragically, we've seen more hospitalizations of younger people, and we're seeing, we've had another death.
Okay. What happens? Let's take a typical case of COVID-19. Somebody in Renfrew is diagnosed with COVID-19 and they're sick. What are the various scenarios? How that could play out? I'm imagining maybe they go home in a few days, maybe a week or so, they feel better. Worst case scenario, what? They end up in Ottawa in an intensive care unit and everything in between, doctor, or?
Right. Well, we have 6 hospital cases right now, and none of them are in intensive care. I think one is out of intensive care in Ottawa, so they're pretty local. But there was a point where our cases were in intensive care in Ottawa, and we had some people who, they were in intensive care a few weeks ago, and they were admitted in February and March. So you get an idea how tough this is, and on the healthcare system, and obviously on the individual and their families. That this, you've heard that the long-term care length of stay is very, very long. So what happens is you go home, and as you know, a lot of people aren't very symptomatic. They may be asymptomatic, in fact, but have a household member that is. They monitor at home. The good thing in Renfrew County is that we have VTAC, and people can phone up, A, to get a test, but B, to get a consultation over the phone. And if there are concerns, we have EMS, we have the paramedics that do home visits, and they assess the situation. And then the next step is to go to a hospital. And in Renfrew County, we have one designated hospital for COVID cases. We have COVID wards, a COVID ward there, because our hospitals are small and they can't really handle these cases, not only from their size, but also from the critical care that they can offer. So we have critical care at the Pembroke Regional. Our cases, we try and send all of our cases there. And if there are big problems, if Pembroke can't handle them because of the severity of the case or because they're overloaded, then they go off to Ottawa. The other exception to that is if there's a case in Arnprior, they may decide for example, to send them to the Queensway or to the TOH as opposed to the Pembroke Regional. So that's what happens. And as I said, when these people do get to intensive care, they stay there for a long time.
There's a report from the Financial Accountability Office for the Government of Ontario that says, it's an updated number, it's going to take 3 years to clear the backlog of medical procedures in Ontario caused by the pandemic. What will that mean for healthcare in a region like yours?
Well, this is a big problem. And we're not only seeing it for surgeries, for elective surgeries, for cancer therapy, for heart disease, for mental health, for our kids in the schools. There are enormous losses here. I mean, the collateral damage from COVID for other health problems is probably larger. I think it's definitely larger than the damage from COVID itself. So this is what happens when you get a pandemic, not to mention the economic damage, but they're all linked. And it's like a three-legged stool. If you don't control one, the other two are going to be out of whack. You're going to have big problems. And I've said all along that, people say, oh, this COVID, it's killing the economy. Well, I think now when I look at our workplaces in Renfrew County, it's the economy that is contributing to making the COVID problem worse.
It doesn't appear as though students will be returning to in-class learning at all until September. What do you think about that?
Yeah, this is sad. Again, this is, you talk about what they lose, not only in terms of academics, but social skills and their friends. And we'd had very little problem in Renfrew County all along. I mean, we had the first school closure in Ontario, but other than that, things have gone along very well. I mean, there's very limited spread in the schools. And, of course, schools reflect what's going on in the community. But once in the schools, they've contained it. And the problem we have is we just looked at this yesterday. And the schools, as you know, they went on their April break pretty early. We were looking at the cases, the school-age cases. And what our statisticians, our epidemiologists told us was that we would have had 15 school outbreaks in the since the schools went home in early April because of the youngsters with cases. So it would have just ground to a halt. And what our decision was yesterday was we can't open schools, and if we did, they'd close pretty quickly after we opened them, given the number of cases we're seeing currently.
Okay. A lot of people, my generation, I'm Gen X, not yet 50, jumped at the opportunity as soon as it was there to grab a dose of AstraZeneca. Now, I'm wondering if we're going to be able to get a second dose of AstraZeneca, whether I might have to mix and match. What do you think, Doctor? What are you hearing about those second doses of AstraZeneca?
Well, you and I are in the same boat. I've had my first dose. It's AstraZeneca. I don't. They're thinking about first doses right now. There is. It appears that the second dose there's less. There are fewer risks. I mean, there are very small risks to begin with, but even less risk with the second dose. I think it's pretty much age related. We'll see what happens. I mean, we're waiting for the authorities to tell us. I mean, we don't have experience at this point in terms of mixing, having cocktails of these various vaccines. So there's really no experience at this point out there. But like anything, we learn as we go with COVID. I think over time we may need to mix vaccines anyway, because we're going to need boosters. This is not going to be a two-shot effort in my mind. So we'll have to wait and see. But certainly I'm. If I could get my second dose tomorrow, I would. I think, as I've said, that if you're over the age of 40, or if you're put it another way, if you're a woman under the age of 40, you should think about this 2 or 3 times. But I think for men and for people over the age of 40, it's not an issue. As I've said before, driving to get your vaccine is probably a greater risk.
Great to talk to you today, Dr. Cushman. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, the 11th of May. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buchan. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, overcast, cloudy, and 10 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. Provincial health officials report 77 new cases of COVID-19 in Ottawa out of 2,073 new cases across the province. 15 more Ontarians have died from COVID-19. Elsewhere locally, Leeds Grenville Lanark Health Unit reports 2 new cases, one in the past 24 hours. The provincial health report says there are 3 new cases in Eastern Ontario and 2 in Renfrew County. The local health units will update their numbers in the afternoon. The Commons Committee on the Status of Women is hearing from Lieutenant General Jenny Carignan, who is leading the military's efforts to change its culture. The committee is looking at the broader issue of sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces as the Defence Committee examines how the government handled an allegation involving former Defence Chief Jonathan Vance. Opposition members say they still have many questions and are torn between trying to dig deeper and having enough time to write a report before the summer break. A driver in the capital facing impaired driving charges after a car hit an OC Transpo bus last night in the Meadowlands Drive area of the city. Ottawa police sharing on Twitter this morning, the driver allegedly had 3 times the legal amount of alcohol in his blood. No one was hurt. Police didn't reveal any other details about the incident except to say the driver has been charged. I'm Sarah Buchan. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
I want to remind you what was on the front page of the Globe and Mail newspaper yesterday morning. Major report. It read in part, quote, quoting here, dozens of residents in 2 Ontario nursing homes hit hard by coronavirus died not from COVID-19, but from dehydration and neglect. From dehydration and neglect. The Canadian military says in reports obtained by the Globe and Mail, the documents contain new details about the deplorable conditions in 2 Toronto homes before the forces stepped in last year, revealing for the first time that causes other than COVID-19 hastened the deaths of residents as outbreaks spiraled out of control and staffing collapsed. At Downsview Long-Term Care Center, where 1 in 4 residents succumbed to the virus, 26 died from dehydration. My goodness, died from dehydration before a military team arrived last June. Hawthorne Place Care Center, 51 residents died of COVID-19, 269-bed facility. The military says it suspects those fatalities pale in comparison to deaths from other issues. Pale in comparison. Neglect. Was it criminal neglect? See, that's maybe where this goes next, that this becomes a widespread criminal investigation. Criminal negligence. But how would something like that unfold? Emilie Taman joins me now, an Ottawa lawyer, Champ & Associates, former federal Crown prosecutor. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's so sad, isn't it? Sad and
so devastating.
And maddening.
Yeah, it's a disgrace. You know, it really is. Deaths in long-term care far exceeded what we saw in other countries, which I think tells us that something went terribly, terribly wrong here.
Okay. But how would one go about investigating if something criminal happened? Walk us through how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that an investigation like this would be very, very challenging. You know, it's very tempting on its face to look at those conclusions, which, as I said, are devastating. But then connecting the dots to who, if anyone, would bear criminal responsibility. Would the liability be at a corporate level? Would there be, you know, senior executives that could be responsible? So it would a big part of what would be required is really determining how it was that this was able to happen. Where were the failures in policies and procedures? You know, what efforts were made to try to mitigate the harm? You know, when were they asking for help from the military, if ever? Is it their fault that it wasn't forthcoming on a timely basis? Is someone else responsible for that? But there are a number of different offenses that could be investigated.
Such as then.
So you mentioned criminal negligence, criminal negligence causing death. That would be one. The standard of fault for criminal negligence causing death is very high. So it's not the same as civil negligence, where kind of on balance you fell short of the standard of care. Criminal negligence requires a marked and substantial departure from the standard of care, which may well be something that could be established here, but it's just important to remember what a high threshold that is of fault. There's also an offense under the criminal code of failure to provide the necessaries of life, and where the standard is slightly lower. It's an objective standard of marked departure, so it doesn't require the marked and substantial departure. And if either of those offenses can be shown to have caused a death, it could also possibly anchor a prosecution for manslaughter on the basis of the underlying unlawful act of failure to provide the necessaries or criminal negligence. But these are very complex because it's unusual in criminal law for offenses to have objective standards of fault. So how you establish who's responsible and establishing the legal causal link between those failures and the deaths is something that would have to be done, and without really participation of anyone who's under investigation, because in a criminal context, they have a right to silence.
Right.
It requires the state to make the case independent of their cooperation.
Yeah. So it would be, the first step would be a police investigation then, right?
That's right. Yeah, there'd have to be a very comprehensive police investigation that looked at all of these different issues in terms of who bore responsibility for what decisions, what the policies were. And I think something that's really important to keep in mind is, what's the end game, right? Like, because if what we want is to really, in a comprehensive way, get to the bottom of what happened and why, so as to prevent it from happening again.
Right.
A process.
Well, you want to, if I could just jump in there, you want to get the bad actors out of the long-term care system in Ontario, right? Who, if they had an operation that contributed to frail elderly people starving to death.
I mean, there's no question about that. But a commission of inquiry could result in a fact-finding process that's more comprehensive, that could also anchor having people removed from certain positions of responsibility, but not necessarily resulting in their punishment criminally. Okay. So as soon as it's a criminal investigation, it puts up a lot of barriers in terms of if your real goal is rigorous fact-finding.
Yes.
Because of the fact that if these are run by corporations and the corporation is under investigation, then they have a lot of rights, which can put up barriers to really being able to get to the bottom of things.
And a big one being the right to against self-incrimination, right? Yeah.
That's right. Whereas in the context of some kind of a public inquiry where there's immunity from prosecution, but a legal requirement to put everything on the table, that is something, the weighing which one of those would be preferable. Now, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but typically any kind of an inquiry, it should come after a criminal investigation to keep those lines really clear. And not to prejudice the rights of the accused in the context of the criminal prosecution, which means it could be years. Like just an investigation like that. These are really, really hard investigations. So that in itself could be a year or more. And that all would delay the type of inquiry that might be really beneficial to properly understanding what went wrong. Because it's not just in these two homes. I mean, this report speaks to that, but we know that there are documented problems in a lot of others, and we should be able to understand how these people died. Was it from COVID? Was it from neglect? What was it about the staffing models that allowed that to happen? Could it have been prevented? Was it foreseeable? And what can we do for the future to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Sure. So, say there's how do you even begin a criminal investigation of this sort? For example, this one news story is about 2 long-term care homes, Downsview Long-Term Care, Hawthorne Place Care Center. Okay, so do we have the OPP investigate just the Downsview Long-Term Care Center or just the Hawthorne Place Care Center? If we have a suspicion, and we've had multiple reports now, auditor's report and a commission of inquiry, the Long-Term Care Commission, do we now go home by home and do separate criminal investigations when it would seem that a lot of the issues are systemic. So is this really even the preferred course of action then, right?
Well, that's what I'm asking myself.
Yeah,
because you're right. If the criminal route, then it has to be each individual case investigated on its own set of specific facts and context, all without the participation of the people who have the best source of knowledge as to what was going on. Mm-hmm. Whereas, because the inquiry that's happened to date is not the same as a full public inquiry, yeah. That's comprehensive and that would look, as you said, very much at the systemic issues, some of which are the result of government policy, right? So what policies need to be changed to prevent this from happening again? It's not just about individual responsibility, especially when a lot of these places will be able to say that they were operating within the law and that the failures were regulatory, a lack of appropriate inspections, with fault lying more on the government side. Of course, the government enjoys certain immunities, certainly from civil liability. And so again, having the government be able to freely explore its own role in these, injustices, as well as looking at the models, profit versus nonprofit. There seems to be some delineation there in terms of where there were more deaths. That's something that you would think would be worthwhile really probing in detail. And, having dozens, if not hundreds, of parallel criminal investigations happening might not, if what people really just want is that they're out for blood and they want someone punished, that's one way to go. If the ultimate goal really, though, is getting to the root in a really comprehensive way of the systemic failures, then criminal investigation might be more of a burden than something that's desirable.
Yeah. And there are families of residents who passed away in long-term care in Ontario. They are seeking civil through the civil courts, right? Seeking a remedy through the civil courts, which is another avenue, right?
It's another avenue, and it's one which is far less restrictive than the criminal context. Because in the context of a civil case, there are reciprocal disclosure obligations. The defendant can't put up the same walls that a criminal accused can. And so, certainly civil suits are one way to go, which could, in a way fulfill, to some extent anyway, both desirable outcomes, one of which is accountability and consequence, and the other is a slightly more open fact-finding process than you would see in a criminal case.
Okay. There was also a bill that some critics say the Ford government passed to shield operators of long-term care homes from allegations or penalties or related to neglect. What do you know about that?
I have to say I'm only aware basically of what you just said.
Right. Okay.
I don't have specific knowledge, but that's obviously a potential legal barrier
obstacle,
to a civil claim.
Is it called indemnify? Is indemnity? Would that be the term?
Yeah, it would be, basically a lawful defense that a cause of action doesn't lie in the circumstances by statute. And, there are possible legal problems to that, and, it could perhaps be challenged. But again, I think what we should really keep our focus on is, what is our end game? And we can have more than one. I'm not saying that we should want transparency at the expense of accountability, but just being very mindful that, I see a lot of people calling for criminal investigations, and I have a lot of sympathy for people who are going down that road because I agree. It's just unacceptable that this number of people died and no one's going to be held accountable. So, I'm not saying that we should preclude that, but we should just understand what we could be giving up, at least in the short term, by choosing that role over another approach, such as a widespread, broad public inquiry.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Happy to help.
Yeah, great stuff. That is Emilie Taman, Ottawa lawyer, Champion Associates, and a former federal Crown prosecutor. Don Drummond, former chief economist, TD Bank, fellow in residence, C.D. Howe Institute, also with Queen's University. This is the Rob Snow Show. Don Drummond coming up next here on City News.
So Rideau-Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our center is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the center. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau-Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau-Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our center, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our center the Ottawa Good Food Box as well as the Market Mobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years and Market Mobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they're both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighborhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
Changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So last week it was a report issued out of Newfoundland and Labrador by the Premier of Newfoundland's new Economic Recovery Task Force. It's now known as the Green Report, and it calls for a big reset for Newfoundland and Labrador. But is Newfoundland and Labrador's fiscal predicament right now necessarily unique, or is this a pan-Canadian problem? Don Drummond is back with me on the Rob Snow Show, former chief economist at the Toronto Dominion Bank, a fellow in residence, Macdonald-Laurier Institute, Stauffer Dunning Fellow, adjunct professor at the School of Policy Studies at Queen's University. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think about this report, the Green Report out of Newfoundland? What is your take on it?
Well, I think it's excellent. The quality of the work and the insights and the homework and the research they did is very impressive, considering they weren't at it that long. But aside from that, not sort of the technical speak for somebody involved in studying public policy, the more important thing, it's bold, it's big, it's bold, and the big reset. I took a crack at this myself. I was asked to do a presentation to this recovery team in January, and to prepare myself, I sort of did a mini and more formal exercise similar to what they're doing. And boy, they're bigger and bolder than me and make it look kind of timid. They are less optimistic or more pessimistic, depending how you want to spin that, on what would happen under the status quo, and hence requires bigger, bolder actions than I had called for. So they envision a much tighter spending regime and more use of tax increases, and that may well be a realistic view. The attitude is obviously they're not going to get out of this problem by tinkering around, and they certainly couldn't accuse this report of tinkering around the edges. It's bold, it's big.
Okay. Why is Newfoundland in the state it is in?
Well, we could go back a couple of hundred years, but we probably don't have time to do that. So we'll only go back to about a decade to a decade and a half ago, and that's when the royalty money started to pour in off the shore. It reached its peak about 10 years ago of $2.8 billion a year. And you have some models around the world. The extreme would be Norway, where they don't spend any of the money coming from their offshore royalties. They view quite rightly it's a non-renewable resource and it may not always be there, and oil prices fluctuate, and they put it into a gigantic sovereign asset fund. You have the example kind of in the middle of Alberta, where at various different times they have tried to put aside savings from their oil and gas royalties into the Alberta Heritage Fund, but they showed that every time they wanted some money, they raided the cookie jar, and it's never really amounted much. Newfoundland and Labrador went the other extreme. They took the revenues and spent it all. And worst of all, they locked that spending into pretty permanent. It largely went into civil service compensation, but a lot of it went into healthcare and education. And yes, it probably bought some higher services, but they ended up with the spending on across the whole array of programs. And Newfoundland and Labrador is 30% above the provincial average, and about 30% above the average of the other Atlantic provinces. So they didn't send any of it. They locked it into spending, and meanwhile, the revenues fell apart. So from that $2.8 billion royalties offshore for the fiscal year it just ended, we're only $500 million. And obviously, I think we would all agree, prospects look pretty shaky. Oil prices have recovered, but they're still in that nebulous area where it's not very profitable for the high-cost offshore. And so they're in a jam.
The delivery, Don Drummond, of public services in Newfoundland, is it higher, say, traditionally because of geography, sparsely populated outposts, these sorts of things?
There's no doubt that a lot of public services do have what we call an economies of scale. If people in a narrow geographical area, you can serve a lot of people from the school, you can serve a lot of people from a hospital. If you've got a place, Trinity Bay, in which you've just got a very small number of people and only one youngster, it's pretty hard to educate those people. It's pretty hard to provide that. So there's no doubt that the population does that. And of course, the big impact, Newfoundland and Labrador, by a considerable margin, has the oldest population in Canada. And that gives it a double whammy. That puts more pressure on your healthcare costs, and it weakens your tax growth because a lot of people are out of their earning years and into their retirement years. So their labor force is declining by a considerable amount. Now, the smaller population, the remote, to some degree is shared by the other Atlantic provinces, and they haven't generated a high spending level. But in fairness, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI are more concentrated and more urbanized than Newfoundland and Labrador. So it does have a situation where you would expect costs to be high, but I think you would have to question whether there's really been great value for spending 30% more per capita than the average of all the other provinces.
Yeah. The report notes that they have a workforce of 260,000 people. That's it. 260,000. The province is $47 billion in debt, according to this report.
Yeah, well, the debt is very interesting because the debt that gets commonly reported by the government is not the whole amount, because, for example, in Muskrat Falls, the bulk of the debt associated with that hydroelectric project is held in the books of a Crown Corporation, Nalcor. And the plan of Nalcor at one point was that debt will be addressed through proceeds from the sale of electricity, but you can fairly easily calculate that electricity rates would have to double for that plan to come to fruition. And so pick your poison. You got the debt, but that would just absolutely destroy the economy and the household budgets of people. So that debt is effectively going to have to be supported by taxpayers. So as the report accurately points, you have to expand the debt, and when they take in consideration all the liabilities that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is ultimately responsible for, it's over 100% of their gross domestic product. And again, it comes back to that gross domestic product is probably not going to grow very fast over time unless we see a resurgence of the offshore. But, I'm not a betting person, but that is not one bet I would take.
Okay. So is Newfoundland unique? Or could you take some, if not all, of the situations, the challenges Newfoundland is facing, and apply it to other provinces across Canada?
Well, to give due respect to Newfoundland and Labrador and their challenges they're facing, they are in the worst situation. Worse because of that history, but also worse because of that demographics. But let's face it, we could get off into a long discussion about this. The whole country's in trouble. We saw a federal budget that basically locks in a debt-GDP ratio of about 50%. It waves its hand and shows a chart that by 2055, the debt ratio could finally come back to the pre-pandemic level, and it's based on extraordinarily optimistic economic and fiscal. I can just slightly change those assumptions, and Canada's debt burden goes up. If you look at Ontario, they waved their hands and said the debt burden would come down ever so slightly by 2029, but that's under healthcare costs increasing by 2.2% a year. That never happened.
No, we just had the financial accountability officer on. He said it's between 4 and 5% a year.
Well, and even in that's less than what the Council of the Federation, the collection of the premiers, they say healthcare costs are going to go up at 5%. So we are awash in debt no matter where you look at it. It's in Newfoundland and Labrador, but it's across most of the provinces. It's in the federal government. And, policy and reaction comes in waves. And at the moment, there's a very blasé reaction to that. There was a sense of crisis in the mid-1990s, but now it's, maybe interest rates will remain very low. And now we're starting to see, hey, maybe inflation pressure will come back. Maybe inflation will go up. We got a problem here. And Newfoundland and Labrador may be at the forefront of it. I would say is at the forefront of it, but they're not completely alone.
Thank you, Mr. Drummond. A great pleasure again. Thank you again. Bye-bye. Don Drummond with Queen's University, former top economist at the Toronto Dominion Bank and fellow in residence at the C.D. Howe Institute. That's it for the Rob Snow Show for today. Back tomorrow right after the 9 o'clock news on City News.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line.